All right, folks, it's another edition of the Online Dinner Party. Yours truly, your host, Mark Lee, here, and glad to be here with y'all. As a matter of fact, I just came back from dinner with some of the Pod TV crew. We were actually at the Washington Duke Inn and having some great conversation, some good food, and of course, some just great connection and all that. Saw Brother Fred that has definitely done the Financial Friday show, as well as both of the founders of the network, Nick Palveda and Kim Calhoun. So great to sit down with them. And of course, Wynn was there. Jacoby came by, Steve Rao, and a number of other folks, including some new people, including a young lady from Syria, and she's got those Syrian roots, and a young lady from Nigeria that is part of the Duke volleyball team. So we were definitely having some great conversation and understand that they're going to be doing some work with us as well. So definitely looking forward to that and had a great time hanging out with them and getting to know them. I think this is our second time of doing that. So we just had a good old time and enjoyed ourselves while we were getting out and about, because more people are getting out and about even during this COVID era and all of that. So I know this past weekend I was actually at an event that a friend of mine did, that she is trying to raise money for a thrift store that will be helping people in the spectrum around autism. So all of the people will be in that spectrum and they'll be working at the store and making money and all of that. So she's actually had a store that she was part of, and she's looking forward to being part of other shows as well. So definitely some great things going on in that space. And of course, people are following things going on in the news and a number of other things as well. So definitely some great conversations going on. And of course, the online dinner party, we bring in various guests and we talk about all kinds of things. And I'm going to bring in my first guest, and I've got some other guests that will be joining us as well. But I'm going to be bringing in Sam Mitchell. And Sam is actually in that autism space, and he's been doing some podcasting, doing some other work, and he's not letting something like what some people may consider a disability or whatever stop him. And I'm always glad when I see people doing amazing things like what Sam is doing and all of that. So definitely, Sam, I'm glad you were able to join us. I know that we've been talking about getting on, and definitely it's taken us a while, but I know that you're here with me today, so
Yep,
I'm glad
I am here
you're
today.
here.
I just got a lot of busy, but hey, better late than never. But thanks for having me on.
No, definitely glad to have you on and glad for you to share a little bit about the things that you're involved in as well, because I do know that you do have done a lot of great work. And I know sometimes people think of disabilities, whether that's physical disabilities or whether that's other kind of disabilities, including those in the autism spectrum, as being something that should stop them. But one of the things I've admired about you and some other people in that space, and by the way, I've got dysgraphia, which is like a form of dyslexia, meaning that, we're driving somewhere, don't tell me left and right, because it might take me a minute to figure it out. And there are other things that are associated with dysgraphia, but it is a form of dyslexia, and I don't let it stop me either. So I'd love for you to share a little bit about, one, how you found out about your autism and how you have not let it stop you, because you are doing a lot of amazing things, including being a podcaster yourself. So I'd love to hear you share a little bit about your own journey as well.
Well, sadly, I cannot tell you really much about when I was diagnosed because I don't remember much. I was 4 when I was diagnosed, so I was young. I don't remember. I guess really all I know is I was sensitive to fireworks and all that jazz. You'll have to ask my mother about that. You'll have to email her or something about that. But the podcast, really, that was my idea. So it's called Autism Rocks and Rolls. It's about autism and how we cope with daily struggles that you may or may not understand. I have over 6,000 downloads and over 270 followers. It really started after I joined my high school's media club. And because I can't be a senior in school forever, I decided I want to continue my media knowledge, but I didn't know how. And I thought finally, after doing some brainstorming and deep thinking, I thought the best idea probably was just to start a new podcast on my own.
Yeah, but you've had some amazing guests. Could you share some of your favorite guests? Because I know that you've definitely had some people that you've had as amazing guests as well. I know I've had the privilege just on this show and some of the other shows of talking to Olympians, talking to entrepreneurs, talking to a number of people. But as I was reading about your show, I was like, wow, he is really knocking it out the park. He's definitely a rock star in the podcasting world, is doing a lot of amazing things. So I'd love for you to share a little bit about some of the folks you have had the pleasure of having on your show and some of the things that you've learned from them as well. Because, a lot of times we think of our daily struggles, whatever that struggle is. And I think we all have struggles. It doesn't matter whether it's in the space of handicap or whether it's in the space of just day to day living. But I'd love to hear your thoughts about some of the amazing guests that you've had.
Yeah, sure. I've had Dr. Temple Grandin. She's probably the biggest autistic advocate in the world. But that's my mom's favorite. It's an honor of her, really. But my favorites are James Durbin. He's an awesome person. He was the fourth runner-up of the 2011 American Idol season, and he has the biggest rock voice I ever heard. It's awesome. And my other favorite probably have to be Peter Lance. He's a video game developer with autism, but he's pretty cool. And I've recently had the opportunity to interview Mick Foley, who has a son on the spectrum and is a professional wrestler, just yesterday. So that was really exciting.
And what do you think are some of the stigmas that people have about folks with autism and that you have discovered even through your own podcast? Because I know one of the things that you do is that you try to take away those stigmas. And I love that about what you're doing, because one of the things that my friend Jacoby does, and we do another show on this platform called Gamers Den, and it's about video games, but he uses video games as a context to tear down stereotypes and to tear down biases that people may have around a variety of things, whether that's race, whether that's politics, whether that's a number of other things. So while the show may be about the video game industry, we use it to tackle issues and to have conversations around a number of issues. As a matter of fact, last month we pretty much dedicated the whole show. As a matter of fact, we dedicated the whole core of shows during that month to Pride, because last month was Pride Month and everything. So his sister is in that community, and so she came on several of those shows. I think she might have missed one, and definitely we celebrated a lot of the issues that go on in the LGBT community. But I'd love to hear your thoughts about some of the stigmas that you have encountered and also learned about through your podcast.
Sure. Some of my experiences that I learned through this podcast is that the negative stigma of autism is real. It shows, because people think we're broken and that we need to be fixed. No, not the case. I think we'll be just fine. We might need some resources in the end. You're probably right with need help or getting healed maybe in some way, but we're not going to hurt you. I mean, there's nothing wrong with autism or having it. It's just a different way of thinking. It's not a disability, just a different way of thinking.
No, I agree with you. It's just a different way of thinking. And I know that even if one of my other jobs that I'm part of, which is Measurement Incorporated, we have a couple of people that may have Asperger's syndrome or autism. And sometimes there is concerns around space and like spatial relations and things of that nature. And then, of course, there's also kind of, in not all cases, but some cases, there's also kind of that Rain Man syndrome, where they may have a lot of knowledge about things that you would be surprised that they have knowledge about. I know that one of my friends who's in that spectrum has a lot of knowledge about, say, like college sports, and like even like the lower level college sports, like Division II and Division III, and can give you all kinds of stats about those kind of things. So I was wondering, is that something that even your own experience that you've dealt with, and also how have you dealt with it in terms of being in the spectrum and in the workforce, and what are some of the things that you encourage people to do in that space?
Okay, yeah. So I have had, like, we call it, in our family, we used to call it obsession, but because it's not anymore to me, honestly, and to our family, it's tapping into their future skills or practicing what they're going to do. Because I've had a couple of NASCAR drivers as well. They were, according to their parents, they were obsessed with race cars. No, they were practicing, because look what they're doing right now. They're racing pretty darn well, if I say myself. They got like in second and first place. So they were practicing for their future skills. Media, even though I talk about it probably a lot, or it's probably one of my favorite things, I'm practicing for my future skills. With WWE wrestling, I might want to work for WWE. I mean, probably not wrestling. I don't have the body for that. But probably maybe work for WWE. So I'm practicing my future skills for that. So it's not obsessing, it's practicing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I like the way that you put that you're just practicing for things in that regards and everything. What have been some of the drawbacks that you've run across, like I said before, both in your work environment, but also in your school environment? Because I don't know, and one of the things that Nick talks about on this platform is that he feels that our education system is still stuck in the 18th century, even though we're now in the 21st century, and that we don't even do enough of conversations around things that we should do. And in his case, he's thinking about like financial literacy and some of the life skills that everybody needs. But I could also argue that we don't do enough conversations around health and mental health and all of that, as well as just other things going on in the human body. So I was just wondering your thoughts about that and how you were treated in school, or how you're even treated in your current school environment and all of that.
Well, I was excluded a lot, and I still deal with exclusion to this day. It kind of irritates me. But I've also deal with having trouble making a conversation. I wasn't a loner in school. I just prefer not to be around people. I had friends, but towards the year, I kind of got. The more days went on, the more sick I got of it. So I was like, fine, we'll give it a try. You don't want to talk to me? That's not my problem. That's your problem. But I did at the end of the day still made some friends. I got to at the end of the day. But there were times where I was like, nope, I'm not dealing with this right now. I'm going in the corner. Peace out.
Yeah, I can definitely see where that's going and everything. Now, one of the things at the dinner party that we do is we love to have different guests and different people. So definitely stick around there, Sam. But I want to bring another guest on who is all about power of people and things of that nature. And that is Miss Patricia Stepler, who is also
Right.
somebody that I met on Potted. And I
Hi.
actually met you on Potted as well. So I know that you wrote a book called Your Dream Power. And you talked about not feeling good enough and worrying about money and a limited belief in your ability and how that impacts you and everything. So one of the things that I'm really loving about what Sam is about is that he's not letting anything in this sense limit him. And it sounds like he's almost a case in point of what you're encouraging everybody to do, which is not be
Exactly.
limited by your different things that are going on. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your book and even what you've heard a little bit from Sam, because you may have some thoughts as well.
Yeah, well, it was kind of interesting listening to Sam. I used to teach, so I
My
taught
mom's a teacher,
school.
actually, too.
Yeah.
My mom teaches 8th grade English, so she's in the between years.
Okay. So I taught music. So I did middle school for 10 years, and then I did elementary school for 22 years. So, I'm familiar with what you're saying, and I totally agree, Mark, with what you said about not teaching the life skills that people need. And it was actually the teaching that got me involved in coaching people today. I have 3 children of my own, and I'd always studied personal development and believed that, we had within us some power, but I could never quite make the change. And it was actually my son who inspired me by seeing him just, get one goal after another. And I had to find out what he was doing because I knew I was missing something. And so my book, Your Dream Power, is really sort of about his journey, not really a, biography by any means, but it's a little bit about his journey as, how he used the power of his mind and didn't even realize what he was doing. But what got me into my coaching business today is watching the children I taught. I was in a Title I school, so it was a lower income school. And I started watching these children that had all this potential, and yet they weren't getting the nurturing that they needed, outside the school or even inside the school to be able to really accomplish what they were capable of. And it was really frustrating to me, when I would see that. And I'd see, students that would come, because I taught music, I saw them from kindergarten through 5th grade. And I'd watch them come in with all their excitement when they were in kindergarten, 1st grade. And then as the years would go by, they changed. And it was so disappointing. So it was like I had to figure out what was going on and how we might be able to improve thinking, because we do have so much power inside us that we can do anything we want to do if we have that support system and we have, an understanding of how to go about that.
No, I agree with you on that. And I want to hear from both of y'all. I might bring in Brian, who's another guest as well. But one of the things that I oftentimes talk about on this show and a lot of other shows, and I definitely want to start off with Sam, is there is a group of folks that, in my mind, I call them the dream killers. They're the folks that discourage you. I don't care what you're going through, whether it's autism or whether it's just day-to-day life, because I've even seen it happen with some of my musician friends and some of my friends in the creative space as well. So I'm always fascinated by what people do to stop those folks that might be trying to discourage them. Like, I'm sure that you had a lot of people, Sam, that were telling you, you've got autism, you shouldn't even be thinking about doing a podcast and things of that nature. So I was just wondering, when you found those people that are negative toward your dreams and ambitions, how do you handle that? And how do you handle it in the space that you exist in and all of that? And then I'd love to hear Patricia's thoughts about that as well, because I think that that's even part of what her book is about as well. But I'd love to hear your thoughts about trying to counter these folks that don't want to encourage us. There's like one thing, it sounds like both of your parents, because I know that they've even helped you on the potted page and everything are very encouraging, but not all the time are our friends and our peers. So I was just wondering how you have dealt with that yourself.
So for me, do you want an honest answer or the Christmas answer?
The honest answer.
You don't give a shit what they
Okay.
think.
That makes a lot of sense. And I like that. You can give the more PG answer as well, or however you described it. But I do like that honesty answer as well.
Yeah, but you just don't care anymore. You ignore it. I mean, I know it's hard to ignore it at the end of the day, in all honesty, but you have to, or otherwise, if you listen to it, it's gonna go the bad way. So why even bother? Then it's not worth your time.
Yep, definitely agree with you on that. Patricia, what are your thoughts? Because like I said, I think that's part of what your book deals with and everything. And I did want to bring Brian in, and hopefully he'll get his camera turned on. But I know he talks about that from, I believe, a financial standpoint. But I'd love to hear his thoughts as well. But I'm going to go with Patricia first, because I do know that Brian has this whole money mindset and is a business coach and all of that. But Patricia, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
So my biggest thought is when you get an idea that of something you want to do, that idea wasn't given to you without knowing that you had the ability to give it or to accomplish it. In other words, God does not play games with you. You know, if you have that idea, you have the ability to make sure it comes true in your reality. And so when you listen to those negativities, that, you know, that's not going to help you. You have to stay in your frame of mind and focus on it. And, you know, I think one of the reasons, you know, as I said, the book is about my son, but one of the reasons that I encouraged him so much and helped him to accomplish those goals was because he was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when he was in 3rd grade. And he also wanted to be an athlete. And just knowing the routine of testing and insulin and how to, you know, maneuver all that was going to be a challenge. And so I always encouraged him, you know, your coaches aren't going to want to have to deal with this, you know, unless you're the best. And so I encouraged him to be the best so that they wouldn't mind, you know, dealing with the incidence of, you know, when his blood sugar would drop low or if his blood sugar would be too high, and, you know, the, you know, differences of how he had to adjust to play a sport. So I think that helped him to, you know, really set goals. But, you know, really, you don't have a dream that you can't achieve. It just doesn't come into your head.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like I said, I'm going to bring Brian in, and I know he talks about dreams as well. But as Patricia was talking, that actually had something that crossed my mind, and I'd love to get your thoughts about this, Sam. But, you know, there was a time that a lot of folks were getting tested in the school system, but not just academically tested, but, you know, they were also trying to find out if they were hyper or not hyper. And that is how some of the folks that are on the spectrum got discovered and all of that. But then there has been some conversation around, were we doing it too much of that? And even like claiming that people were into the spectrum that might have just been overly hyper. And as one that has autism, I was just wondering your thoughts on this, because I do sometimes hear people that wonder if we don't overly diagnose what goes on, particularly in our school system. Not saying that we shouldn't pay attention to autism and Asperger's and some of the other things that exist, but that there might be sometimes a tendency to want to get the kid that is hyper or just has that kind of thing going on into like a program. And I know that that has been a issue within the minority community where some folks are like, no, my kid doesn't really have that. They're just hyper and like to, you know, go run and do those things of that nature.
I know where you're going with this. And if it were me, don't do it, because you're taking away the child's needs. It's fine to ask for help. It's fine for resources. It's fine to get diagnosed with type 1 diabetes and get insulin or get the needle. It's fine. I mean, it's whatever makes you successful, whatever you need in order to make you successful.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Hey, Brian, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. I don't know if you've been hearing, but we've got Sam, who is a podcaster and is definitely very much in that autism space in terms of being an advocate and everything. And we've got Patricia, who has written this amazing book and everything that's kind of a self-help book. And now I've got you, and I know that you are specializing on helping your clients get clarity on who they are most meant to serve. And I know that that's something that is a very important thing for all of us, no matter where we are in life and what we're doing and what our status in his life is. And no matter what our race, creed, ability or non-ability or whatever it is that we may find to be the stopping factors is, but you are oftentimes talking about authenticity and being mindful. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about what you've heard so far and just kind of your reflections on the money mindset and being a business coach and consultant.
Sure. So where to begin? Like just with your talk, just to tag along with your talk about dreams and so forth. I always tell people no mind can be conscious of a need or a desire unless the possibility of its fulfillment exists in some way. You might need to steal money from Jeff Bezos to pay for the rocket ship, but anything in your mind, you can hold it in your hand. And I always tell people, keep those possibilities open. When in doubt, there's got to be a way. Otherwise, you would not think about it. And we have to keep giving ourselves permission to think that, especially when it's what we want, because it's just crazy how, in my own work, my entrepreneurial growth, just growing, thinking how often I've been denied what I wanted because you're only allowed to have what you need. And, for the longest time, I never asked for a toy that cost for more than $9 because my mom said $9 was expensive back in 1989. And so, and then that belief just sits in your subconscious mind. All of your parents, your grandparents' habits and thoughts around money, your parents, your grandparents' habits and thoughts around money are just, in your mind without even realizing it. And before you know it, you're also recycling tea bags for the third or fourth time and doing other weird things that are just, bizarre when you realize the abundant supply we actually have in the universe.
No doubt. And I'd love to hear from all three of y'all. But one of the things that I've oftentimes heard people talk about is the difference between, say, a career and a job, like what I'm doing here and what I do with my event planning. I consider that more of a career, but I do know that even in this pandemic, we find more and more people that have actually, got stuck in the jobs, and sometimes they are in a job rut. I was actually in a clubhouse room and we were talking about that job rut. And to me, that's a shame because I think more people should be passionate about what they're doing and actually love what they're doing. And I don't care if you're going to work for Macy's or if you're going to work as a janitor, but you should have like some sort of love for what you're doing and things of that nature. And I think that a lot of people just go to work for the sake of paying bills and don't really have a love for what they're doing. But I'd love to think about your thoughts around that. And I guess I'll start with Patricia first, then come to Brian and Sam. But I definitely think that we should have that love for what we do. And I think sometimes we have people get too caught up in that job situation and only doing it to pay the bills.
Well, I think that goes a lot to what Brian was just saying about we get stuck in these habits. And, I have a friend whose son went to law school because he didn't know what else to do. And his dad was a lawyer. So it's not what he wanted to do, but he didn't know what to do. Went to law school for a year and dropped out because he didn't like it, and it's like, we sometimes see people go into the same professions as their parents. I myself was a third generation teacher, and I pretty much told my own kids, you can't be a teacher. I want you to do something else. And, I was trying to break that mold. But, I think a lot of times people get a job and it's not that they really want it. They just don't know what else to do. And then they just stay there. And, even if they don't like it, they won't move because they get comfortable, and to step out of that comfort zone is difficult for a lot of people.
I hear you. I didn't want to get to Brian, but before I get to Brian, I was going to come back to Sam. Sam, what is one of the things that got you into podcasting? Was this something that you always thought that you wanted to do as a teenager, or what drew you into this world of podcasting? And do you see yourself doing this, say, 5 to 10 years down the line? Do you see making a career out of podcasting or out of radio, or is this just a ends to a further goal that you have later in life in terms of things that you want to do? So I was just wondering, how you got into podcasting, and two, if you see this as being a career path.
Well, for me, I did after I joined my high school's media club, and because I can't be a senior in high school forever, I decided to finally start my own podcast, and as a way to continue my media skills. As far as a career, talk to me in 5 years and we'll talk again, because I'm not for sure right now. I'm hoping it to be, but I can't promise you. But I do want to piggyback off what you were saying with job and career. The kind of opposite of your two answers, to be honest with you, because to me, as a mental health advocate and autistic advocate, they're the same for a reason. Because in my opinion, you can make success easy. Success is the same whether you're the president, whether you're a worker at McDonald's. I mean, there are different levels, granted, and you get paid a little less, but it's still success. You're still doing something and not just sitting on the couch 24/7.
That makes a lot of sense and everything. What's your take on that, Brian? Hearing what definitely Sam's got to say, and also just kind of the success model and everything, because I do know that sometimes, even within the disability space and the mental advocacy space, sometimes they get stuck into certain kind of jobs. I think that I had mentioned earlier, if I did, I will mention it now, that I've got a dear friend that I helped with a special event that they were doing, and they were working at a thrift store, and that thrift store, the goal of that store is to actually hire people with autism and with people that fall within the spectrum, because their hope is that they will then, of course, be able to break some money and also learn life skills that they can carry on with them, whether they stay in that store for 3 years or whether they stay in that store for the duration of their life. But I do know that my friend Crystal Austin is very much an autism advocate as well, so she's hoping to help these folks by creating this thrift store. And there was a store that was similar to they had, and then they kind of are breaking off from that one. And I think that that one was going in a different direction, but she's definitely hoping to have a store if she can get the building. And that's part of the reason we did the fundraiser this past weekend, was trying to raise some money so that she can purchase the building and then put all these items that she's collected into the store and get the store to continue that cycle regularly of collecting and selling and things that go on in that thrift store space. But Brian, what is your thoughts just about the job and career? I was just giving a background about the store and everything.
I think one problem is we're all stuck in this idea of making the job be the end goal, and we don't have a greater purpose beyond that. And I started out as a professional opera singer, and I originally envisioned being a professor like my father, but teaching music instead of criminal justice, because I dared to do something different. But then I realized thousands of other people had the same life plan. So it'd be like, less than 1% of people actually get the full-time jobs these days doing that. But too often it seems like we're wired to make the job the goal, as opposed to, a bigger, broader mission for a purpose in life to be that goal. And so I try to encourage people to think, if you get that thing that you dream of doing, that, what's next? Then what? You prove you're the best singer in the world. Now what? That kind of thing. We have to keep thinking, bigger. What purpose do we want to have? How do we want to help, contribute to the, increase and expansion of life and so forth? And, what do we want people saying about us at our funeral? And then, as we, and what will live on beyond us once we leave these bodies that we have.
Brian, just really quickly, because I did not know that part about the opera singer and everything. What do you think is some of the biggest misconceptions folks have about opera singers? And do you still do that on the side, or do you still pursue anything to do with the opera and everything along those lines? Or have you given up on opera singing altogether? And what are some of the big misconceptions that you think people have about opera singing?
Well, I think part of it.
Hold on, guys. Sorry, I have to go. Just want to let everyone know.
No problem. One of the things that I do with everybody before I continue the conversation, but one of the things I do with all my guests, and I want to do it with you as well, is we love our guests to give their thoughts about positivity, because it is an international audience and things along those lines. So before you leave, Sam, if you can let folks know how they can reach you on social media and on the podcast, and also any words of encouragement that you would like to leave with our international audience, because it is an international audience. So we always like our guests, no matter where they are in life. And also you can tell people where you are here in the United States, sure. But let them know about your sense of positivity. Indiana.
I'm in Southern Central Indiana, and you can find me on Podbean, YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, LinkedIn, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, iHeart, Listen Notes, and Pandora. Now, my 2 words of advice, it's going to sound blunt again, but it's true. And if the world did these 2 things, I think the world would be a lot better. Be nice and don't be stupid.
I love that. It makes a lot of sense and everything. So I appreciate you coming on, and I'll get in touch with your folks, and hopefully we can have you come back on, maybe even more one-on-one. But I'm always glad to have you on. And I love having people come back on whenever they are game for coming back.
Never you need me, buddy. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere for a good long while.
All right. Sounds good.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye, everybody. Nice meeting you, Brian.
Good to you.
Bye.
Pleasure. So, Brian, coming back to the opera singing, because that actually fascinates me and everything. I was just wondering your thoughts about the misconceptions that people have about opera singers.
Good question. I mean, it's not just the fat lady that sings. They come in all shapes and sizes, and all sorts of music. And it's a great, it's something everybody should have a chance to have exposure to. But it's definitely it's a challenging industry, and there's funding and all that other stuff that happens with it. but also there's more than just the big shows, the big houses. There's also classical singing that happens in smaller scales and smaller community theaters, and smaller level opera houses, as well as at churches and other places. So there's so many opportunities to get exposure to good quality classical. There's millions of amazing singers in the world just waiting for an opportunity to be heard. So don't be afraid to look into that.
Definitely, I appreciate you saying that. And Patricia, if I remember correctly, you said that you were a music teacher, and I am a big fan of jazz and blues and a lot of other styles. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about music, because I would argue that that's something else that we used to teach more of in the school system, and unfortunately have gotten away from that and the rest of the arts as well. But I'd love to hear your thoughts about just music in general, if you want to chime in on the opera and some of the other forms. Because like I said, I'm a big blues fan, but also a fan of jazz and R&B and a number of other musical styles, including country.
Well, of course, I was a trained singer also, and not good enough to be on an opera stage, but I did sing in a couple operas in college. But I do think that we don't have, the arts are so important to a lot of kids. And, when we start to see those arts programs diminished or gone, disappearing, that it's a real shame, because some kids come to school just for those experiences. If they don't do well in school, I mean, I had a number of kids that, weren't necessarily academically inclined, but they could express themselves in the arts. And so it's a real shame when we do away with those arts programs, because it's an avenue that you can appreciate. And, it's a way to relax, and have, like you said, the jazz music and everything. And, it's a shame that more people don't get to experience opera, because it is the highest vocal form that there is. And, it's just really, it's exciting,
I graduated in 2000 in my high school. It was all classical stuff, all great, wonderful music. And now the funding cuts over the past 2 decades, it's been kind of, it's not quite the same. And sometimes, like the choral program, you have to let those kids who shouldn't be singing Whitney Houston songs sing Whitney Houston songs to get them to want to be in choir. So it's kind of ball game now.
I agree with you. I was wondering from both of you, what are some of the biggest life lessons that you have learned in the course of doing your work, whether that's you as a business coach, or actually I consider both of you business coaches, but I just wonder, what are some of the life lessons or things that you have learned that have surprised you? Because I know a lot of times when business coaches get into this space, they are oftentimes surprised at what people don't know. Because I'll just give an example. I know that I've had conversations, including with a friend of mine from, I think he may be back in New York, but he was doing some work in Dubai. And of course, all his friends were trying to come at him with different business proposals and business ideas. I should say more like business ideas. But then when it came time for them to have a proposal or to have a business plan, they looked at him as if that was a strange thing and didn't really have an idea of what that even entailed. And I would say the same thing about just a basic resume, because even folks that are in the job market, a lot of them don't even have a basic resume. So I was just wondering, what are some of the things that you have learned that have surprised you? And I guess I'll go ladies first. So I'll start with you, Patricia, and then come down to Brian.
Well, when I do coaching with people, it's more about their mindset.
Right.
And so I guess what surprises me sometimes is how little they know about you needing to shift their thinking. Mm-hmm. And that with small shifts in their thinking, it can make a huge result. So I don't really get into the business plans and things like that with people. Mine's more of shifting your thought process, your habits, and how those habits are, causing you problems instead of really helping you. And if we can just shift a few things, it makes a huge difference in the results that you'll get.
Definitely. I want to get to Brian and some of the things that he learned. Before I get to that, I was just going to follow up with you, Patricia. And there's that old saying that the first person that we need to get to know is ourselves. And I wonder how many people of us, whether it's knowing it for relationship purposes or business purposes, actually really know ourselves and are even comfortable with ourselves. So I was wondering, is that something that you also run into, where a lot of people don't really know who they are, much less what they want to do?
Yes, I would agree with that. They don't know who they are. They don't know what they want. They don't know what they want to become. And, I think that goes back to the schools too, because we don't really encourage people to know who they are. There's never any time where they have that opportunity to figure out. And, parents, I'm guilty of this too, but as a parent, you kind of want your children to do different things. And so you encourage them, and maybe that's not what they want. And so then again, you're projecting what you want on a child instead of allowing them to figure out what it is they want to do.
So I hear you, and I definitely agree with you on that and everything. And the other thing that happens sometimes, and I'll let Brian chime in on some of the things that he's learned, but if you want to chime in on a follow-up question, Patricia, is that I sometimes think that we limit even what we're allowing our kids to learn. My dad, I have two nephews. I don't have any kids of my own, but I have two nephews that are about to be 12 and 13 next month in August and everything. So they'll be 12 and 13. But I remember when they were young, my dad was already going around showing them things on Earth, like, animals, little beetles, things of that nature. And I'm sure that some of my friends were looking at him like, why are you even bothering to engage the kids at this young age? Because, science says that the brain is only developed at a certain part in our life. And so maybe it wasn't resonating with them. At least that's the argument that I've heard from some people. I didn't necessarily buy that argument because I thought it was a great idea that he was already engaged in it. Like, we've already heard stories of people that were having music introduced to people when they were in the uterus and everything. So I'm actually believe that they can have an impact on their life even when they are being developed and created. But that's just my philosophy and everything. And I do know that there's some science behind that as well. But I was wondering, one, if you've got any comments on that, Patricia, and then I'll come to Brian and the things that he's learned as well.
Well, I definitely do think that impacts. And when you were saying about in utero, I think of Mozart. Mozart was this amazing musician at such a young age. And, he wasn't even taught, and he could just start playing. So I do think there's a lot that we can do to form and help kids to become smarter or more knowledgeable. And I think it's great when you're showing kids, because they're picking it up. It's just going right into their subconscious. Everything around a child's going right into their mind, which is how a lot of those habits get formed. So, we don't have a filter until we're about 7 or 8 years old before we start being able to say, yes, I think this is right, or no, I don't think it's right. But all that information is going right into their minds.
No, I definitely agree with you on that. Brian, like I had asked you originally and everything, what are some of the things that shocked you, even with people dealing with money mindsets? Because I know a lot of times we don't even think about money in the right way. And I know a lot of people that don't even know how to balance their checkbooks, much less budget what they want to have in terms of a day-to-day living expense. And I'll, just like Patricia admitted some faults, I will admit some of my faults. I will say that I am not the best at budgeting myself. And I will sometimes, I have a running joke that sometimes I will take my ATM card and put it in the ATM machine, and the ATM machine will start laughing because it knows that there is no money in there. And why would you try to take money out if you haven't put anything in? So definitely that kind of exists and everything. So definitely I think that you have to have that correct money mindset. And I know that that's part of what you deal with. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about some of the things that surprised you, included in that money space. Because I know a lot of people that can't balance their checkbook and don't know how to file their taxes and a number of other things that are financially oriented.
Yeah, one thing I like to say is that, you listen to Dave Ramsey talk and you feel like you're always making bad decisions. But most of us really, we just don't know how to earn enough to actually not need to worry as much. It's part of the problem. Like, if everybody got to a certain income threshold, probably, I think most parts of the country, if you're at least above 70 grand to 100 grand, that's what you need to at least live comfortably and whatever. But most people are barely making half that. And that's, part of the struggles in some ways. So we don't have the skills that actually bring the money into our lives. And we're not taught of the different income streams we can create to bring money in passively, and how to actually sell in a compassionate, authentic way. That's not the sleazy, slick trick that most of us associate with sales. So, it's a lot of my work I found is like helping people with their fear of money. It's their fear of selling, like the kind of two sides of the same coin kind of a thing.
No, I hear you. And when you talk about the fear of selling, well, two things came to my mind. One is I'm always having people approach me about getting involved in those sales jobs that are kind of like those multi-level marketing schemes. And I don't care whether it's Amway or prepaid, or there's a number of them out there. Of course, there's the ones that involve around travel and everything. But the argument that they give you is that, just get involved in it. It'll only take a little bit of your time, or you can do referrals, or you can do this and that. It won't take away from what you've already got going on. And what I've got going on in my case is an entrepreneurship business of my own, as well as a couple of part-time jobs to help pay those bills and everything. So I'm already got like 2 or 3 jobs, and then you're talking about adding a 4th or 5th, but claiming that it's not going to impact me in terms of the time management. And time management is also something very important as well. So I'm just wondering what your thoughts are about how a lot of times people will try to sell you into getting involved with that whole concept that you can manage your time and that you can do 5 or 6 jobs, when the reality is that, if we do 2 or 3 good, we're doing really well.
Yeah, sometimes one of the problems is we are too quick to think it's always another job and not something that we can just set up and not have to think about as often. Like if you create an online course, or if you create, some kind of subscription opportunity that people can pay for, you might be making, a little bit here and there, like as far as actual work, but then it's something where people don't necessarily, you're not necessarily doing as much actual work. It's just a self, thing that kind of pays for itself, like whether it be selling your content or other stuff out there, like, Patreon, for example, and Substack, and there are other websites out there where you can put your content down there regularly that you're already creating, and then just, facilitate a space for people to join in and have it. And it can be something where you can bring in some decent money without having to necessarily do a whole lot of extra work. And then there's also just the value proposition of if you're offering a service, especially my business coaching work, it's not about the time for money trade, but it's the value that I'm offering for the people that I'm serving. And that, if I'm going to help them make a certain amount of money or whatever, then that that value can be appropriately remunerated, if that makes any sense. So sometimes we're all stuck in that industrial mind, paid by the hour only kind of thing, and we don't see the whole residual value of everything that we're creating.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And one of the other things that I would be curious to hear from both of you, because you both have to do this and everything, is I'm oftentimes afraid that we are too quick not to understand our own worth. And by that, I mean, we don't want to necessarily charge what we should charge and everything. Because I know I've even been guilty of that, where there might be things that I am doing that I know my competitors are charging within, say, the $1,000 range, and maybe I'm going the $100 range and things of that nature, because we don't always know our own worth, or when we find our own worth, then we're afraid to actually tackle people and to actually sell, because you do sometimes want to increase the price and things of that nature. So I guess I'll start this time with you, Brian, but how do you deal with that in terms of pay? And I'd love to hear from Patricia as well, because I think that sometimes we as people, just in general, don't know our own worth and are almost afraid to ask what we're worth.
Yeah, sometimes it's a matter of, you got to know who your actual ideal client is first, and where they are and what they value. One thing I found with my own evolution, I originally started my business coaching trying to help people fresh out of college, and people who didn't really know what to do with life and so forth. And really my actual wheelhouse and where I'm really good at, more established entrepreneurs who actually understand the investment and what it takes. And so when you know your ideal client, the ideal client understands your ideal price, and it can be more of a win-win situation and less of a tough sell, if that makes any sense.
Now, that makes a lot of sense. Patricia, I'd love to hear your thoughts, and just to add more of the context to that. I know that sometimes we don't even know how to go about getting what we want. Like, I've got some friends that have got some projects in the creative space, and they're trying to raise money and things of that nature. But, they sometimes get frustrated because they're not getting the people to actually buy into what they're selling and things of that nature. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about one, creating that worth, and also just kind of like being assured that you are worth what you're asking.
Well, I kind of agree with Brian, what he was saying there. And I think you have to figure out who your client is. And I know for a while that was difficult for me. And I worked with a guy who was really good on branding. Mm-hmm. And, really made me think about, who is it that I want to work with? What, I could work with anybody, but that's not going to get the results for the people that really need me. And, I think you're right about not feeling comfortable with what you're charging until you're confident that you can get people the results, and that, your own value, and you have that self-confidence. Then you can start asking what you're really worth, because if you're able to take a company and, double, triple, quadruple their income, you're worth it, and you're worth the price that you feel that you deserve.
No, I agree with you on that. The other thing that my friend Ray Pascal, and he used to be a rental coordinator at the Carolina Theater, talks about is, and it kind of comes back to what we're talking about, but I'd love to hear both of your thoughts about this, is the folks that also want to do what he calls a brain drain, meaning they want to get a lot of the information and then either turn around and use it for their own business or their own skill sets and everything, but they don't always want to pay you what you're worth. So I was just wondering, as people that are in this business coaching space, how do you deal with that? Because I'm sure that you're always getting people that what my friend Dolores Watson, I think is her name, but she runs a black media company, or not a media company, but like a think tank kind of organization and everything. And she talks about people wanting the hookups and things of that nature. And she calls them, things that you don't want to get caught up in and everything. But I'd love to hear your thoughts about how you deal with that, because I'm sure as business coaches, both of you get folks that want to get the information, but don't necessarily want to pay the cost of what they should be paying.
I'd say we all have unique infinite worth, and we all should be charging infinity. In the end, we all have, qualities and things that make us unique. And even if somebody took me word for word and created some other new product and service off of it, it would still be their own, that'd be what they're doing. It has nothing to do with me. So it'd be what it is. And I wouldn't let that get to me, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's like we're not pineapples at the grocery store. We're not commodities. Any kind of human labor and any kind of job has, unique, qualities and, forms of value that doesn't exactly get, measured and, reflected in the way we do the hourly wages sometimes.
No, I hear you on that. Don't even get me started on hourly wages, because I think that the minimum wage is ridiculous and things of that nature. And we definitely got to get better on that, because definitely seven, whatever it is now, is a crying shame in the United States. But that's just my opinion. I don't know if you agree with me, Brian and Patricia, but I cannot believe that we're still stuck on these low wages and everything.
Yeah, I'm tempted to say that we should have Matthew 35:25 be the minimum wage, include the prison visit costs, all that stuff, cost of food, clothing, shelter. And I just sing the song Come Ye Blessed once, and there are a lot of politicians I want to sign that to sing at my church if they had to come.
I hear you. What are your thoughts about that, Patricia? Both of the people that might be draining you, and also just the minimum wage as low as it is.
Well, people can drain you if they're just trying to, I think what you're trying to get as much information as they can for nothing.
Right.
And, that's not really going to help them. It's going to come back to them. They're not going to have the success that they could, because when you invest in yourself, that shows a commitment. So if you're just trying to get something for nothing, there's no commitment. So you're probably not going to do, you're not going to do what they tell you to do anyhow. So, people that are investing in themselves, they have a drive and a desire, to move forward.
I agree with you. And actually, Brian, you kind of alluded to it, but I'd love to hear both of your thoughts about the importance of karma, because I've actually been in some clubhouse rooms and they've talked about karma, and I'm definitely a believer in karma and things of that nature. So I'd love to hear both of your thoughts about the importance of karma, and also the importance of spirituality. I won't even say religion, because sometimes I think that gets caught up in the whole church structure and the building and the personalities, but definitely spirituality is something that I am very big on and everything. But I'd love to hear your thoughts about the importance of karma within business, and also the importance of spirituality with the work that y'all do and everything. So I'll start back with you, Patricia, and then come down to Brian.
Yeah, I think what goes around comes around. And, you get back what like the boomerang effect. You get back what you put out there. So, and you see that happening all the time. So I do believe that. And in spirituality, yes, you have to. I don't know how you can go through life without believing there's a higher power. You just look at nature, you see all the abundance, you see everything there. And I believe we're here to create abundance and to expand and to grow. And, I think you have to have something that you're believing, whatever you want to call it, whether you call, God or not, but there's definitely an infinite intelligence out there that created these laws of the universe. And if you follow the laws of the universe, they work for everybody, just like gravity works. And if you follow the laws of, compensation, things like that, it's going to work for you too.
No, I definitely agree with you on what you're saying there. Brian, I'd love to hear your thoughts about karma and spirituality, and if I can add a little bit of that as well and add another twist to it. I'm also a believer in destiny, and I don't think that people meet accidentally, and I think that there is reason for the people that we have put in our lives and everything. And yes, I do kind of believe in that whole adage, they might be there for a reason, a season, or I forget the other one that's part of that rhyme and everything. But I definitely believe in that kind of philosophy. But I'd love to hear your philosophy, even about destiny, karma, and how important spirituality is even into your own business.
Yeah, well, with karma, I always tell people money that flows is money that grows. So when you put money out into the universe, it'll come back to you, that boomerang effect, same kind of thing. But if you hoard the cash under your bed, it's going to do nothing. It's the parable of the talents basically all over again. If you're going to put it to use or you're going to just hoard it and do nothing with it, then you're going to get it taken away eventually. So you have to, keep being afraid, keep, putting the money out there and keep, don't be afraid to make the right investments and so forth. And then, but yeah, we are all here for a reason, and there are no coincidences in life. There's a reason we're on this call together. There's a reason, I woke up and saw what I saw on my phone, and it's becoming such a world where there's no coincidence. There's some kind of destiny, and there's some kind of higher purpose with everything that happens.
I definitely agree with you on that. There's definitely a reason and a purpose, and that everything happens for a reason and everything. I do sometimes wonder about, when you're using that parable and everything, if sometimes those that are super affluent don't get too caught up in the playground of the riches and everything. And I don't know whether you agree with me or not, but I'm sitting there going like, do we really need to have Sir Richard Branson go up into space for a long joyride? Because as far as I'm concerned, a 4-minute space ride in terms of the actual time that you're in the weightlessness space is a joyride. So like I said, it sounds to me like a very expensive joyride, since I think the cost of the tickets were like $250,000, and only people like him and the Kardashian young lady and others can even afford that. But I was wondering what your thoughts were about that, because I do sometimes feel that the super rich and affluent sometimes get too caught up with their money. And as a favorite blues song of mine says, I haven't seen an armored car at a funeral yet.
Yeah, I like to take solace in knowing that at least, most of that money went to someone's paycheck further down the road in some way or another, either directly or sometimes we forget that, like even if somebody's wearing a watch that costs $100,000, well, engineers and other people got salary jobs helping make that. So it's, we can't just be quick to be that dismissive of it, even though it's like, yeah, we probably could have solved world hunger with that ride. But
correct. Yeah, I guess that's where my head was. I'm sitting there going like, we probably could have served world hunger. We probably could have dealt with homelessness and things of that nature, even though I just recently, I think it might have been Clubhouse that I was in, heard about somebody. It might have even been one of those super rich people that had got a house that literally you can build out of a box, because they were talking about some like villa thing. And I think it might have been Elon Musk or the other really super rich person, Bezos. I think it was Musk that had created this and everything. But what are your thoughts about like this kind of like super rich mentality of not doing the money being used for those kind of goods? Like if what I heard was correct and we've got like a box that can be turned into a villa, I think that's super cool, but I've got to do more research on that. Yeah. Patricia?
Well, I do believe that, once we have our needs met, that we need to start looking at what we can do for the greater good of people and for humanity. And, I think there's a higher purpose in all of us. I just wanted to get back to with things happening for a reason. Mm-hmm. I do believe everything that happens, there's a reason behind it. And we might not know that reason at the moment it's happening, but when we start to look back, I think it was Steve Jobs said that you can't connect the dots going forward. You can only connect the dots going backwards. So when you look back, you can say, that's why that happened. And, we don't always understand it, but that's the way the laws of the universe work. When you're focused on an idea and you are going after that idea, the things that you need, the people you need, the resources you need will always come to you. And so, that's how everything happens for a reason. That's just the universal laws.
No, that makes a lot of sense. One of the things I was going to ask both of you is, who are some of the people that were your own personal inspirations, whether that's family members, like maybe you had somebody that was a family member that was pushing you towards the entrepreneurial and authorship and other kind of spaces that y'all are in, including the coaching spaces and all of that, and also who are some of the bigger influences. Like I know that I've done some conferences in the African American space, and a lot of them have used Napoleon Hill as one of the people that they are big time fans of, which is the guy that wrote Think and Grow Rich, and a couple of other folks, including the gentleman that had the movie of Pursuit of Happiness was based on. So the gentleman that had led a poor life and then became rich later on, that I know that that's another book that sometimes people will use as an influencing book as well. But there's so many out there, but I was wondering who some of your personal influences were, as well as authors and thought leaders that you look at. So I guess I'll start with you, Brian. So Brian, who are some of the people that have influenced you either out of your own family, teachers, or people of that nature, as well as those that are in the greater international community?
Yeah, and my family, start with my father. He passed away 6 years ago and lost his battle of cancer at the age of 60. But he was a professor, and he was a classic case of growing up in the very poor in Detroit and working his way by getting all the good grades, going to school, doing all the right things, and worked his way up into the middle class and, making close to a six-figure equivalent, by the time he, got to the end of his life. And so he always told me I could do anything I want if I just, don't be afraid to do it. And so I kept on doing that and decided to try and pursue opera singing and other classical stuff and grow my voice and, curate that talent even more. Then another inspirational person was the late Sister Shirley Hosky at my parish in my hometown that I sang at. She loved me like the child she never had. And, one of the few figures from my musical life where I didn't doubt, their, worship and admiration and, support for everything I was trying to do as a singer. Whereas because we have so many crazy personalities that, can make it very easy to want to, basically feel burnt out from the industry, if that makes any sense. But then as far as the business and personal development work, there's obviously Think and Grow Rich. I can't get through a day without thinking at least of some chapter or whatever. Like, for example, the very end, the ghosts of criticism, or the fear of criticism that we all have. Like, we're like, it's, something where everybody, critiques us all the time. And it's fascinating to listen to that book and realize how it, aside from a few obvious events, like it sounds like it was written recently. And another one that also refer to a lot is The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace Wattles, published in 1910. Same thing, natural laws of the universe. And, you can read that book, and except for talking about aerial transportation being a new thing, it would sound like it was written recently.
It's interesting that you say that, because I was actually just thinking that I was on one of my other shows and we were talking about civil rights leaders. And I remember back in my high school years, I had to write an essay about Martin Luther King. And this was like he died in the late 60s. So this was probably about 10 years after he had passed. And the essay was basically, what would Martin Luther King Jr. be doing now? And I was basically saying that he'd be fighting for civil rights, for education reform, and a number of other things that I was using as examples. And the ironic thing is that some 40 years later, like I said, I wrote that in like 1979 for a summer camp that I was going to, because the summer camp was actually in the summer of 79. So I probably wrote it in either 78 or 79. But we're talking some 41 years later, and I could still probably say the same thing to this day. So a lot of these things do stay, even with the philosophies, that they are still relevant to this day. And in the case of civil rights, it's unfortunate that they're still relevant to this day, because some of those fights you think we would have won by now, but they are still going on, and everything along those lines. Before I get to Patricia and hers, I was just wondering, are there any misconceptions that you think people have about Detroit and everything? Because whenever I think of Detroit, of course, I think of it being a big industrial town. I think of Motown, of course, on the musical side. And I definitely think about some of the racial situations that go on in Detroit. And of course, the sports teams, because I did follow back in the day y'all's basketball team to some degree. Not saying I was a fan, but I did follow them, and definitely follow. I'm a Brewers fan. So, y'all's baseball team was actually one of those hated rivals and everything. Not as bad as St. Louis, but still a hated rival, and all of that, meaning the Tigers, and definitely some other sports as well. So y'all are definitely a sports venue. But right now, I think about the poor economy and, of course, the things that were going on with your water there in Detroit. But outside of that, what are some of the other thoughts and misconceptions that you have of your hometown?
I mean, my dad grew up in the city of Detroit, and then he made me grow up all the way out in Clarkston, which is halfway to Flint. A very different, very safe suburban area. Like back when I was a kid, it was one of the safest suburbs in the country or whatever, or something like that. And basically, it was always us versus them, the north and south side of 8 Mile kind of, divide. You have the people in Detroit versus people in the suburbs. That's a real thing in the news and so forth. But overall, though, the city itself, it's definitely been, especially the past 15 years, been making some great progress. And I recently went to downtown Detroit for the first time in a long time after I've been living in LA, then returned to Michigan last fall. And I'm just shocked to see all the new buildings and development, and it feels like it's trying to catch up to LA and Chicago and the other cities. But when I was a kid, I was a big fan of the Pistons, of course. But then when Jordan beat them, I became a Jordan fan. Then I got beat up in school for that.
Well, I can't talk about that because actually um, the Panthers were not around when I was a kid. So I am a diehard Minnesota Vikings fan. And ironically, my brother, who is also from North Carolina, roots for the Bears. And that was a time that I was involved with a young lady who was a Green Bay Packers fan. So you can just imagine kind of the conversations that were going on in the house. And it didn't help that I had an aunt and uncle that were down with the Dallas Cowboys. So you can imagine just kind of the sports conversations that were going on just in the football space. We won't even talk about basketball and baseball and some of the other sports. But Patricia, who are some of the folks that you have been inspired by? If you want to share a little bit about your hometown as well, definitely that's now is the time to do that.
I guess my grandparents had a big impact on me. Just in understanding where I came from, my heredity. And my parents, of course, had a big impact. When it comes to what I'm doing now, of course, Think and Grow Rich and Science of Getting Rich is probably my favorite book. And I also, Bob Proctor. When I first met Bob Proctor about 8 years ago, he was my missing link. That's why I call him. He was my missing link because my son inspired me, and he, solidified in my mind what my son had done and what he had accomplished and how he did it. And so I love Bob Proctor. He's just great.
He's amazing.
And so I do. I'm associated with him. I'm certified through the Proctor Gallagher Institute. And so that's, the laws of the universe are just so important there. And then Neville Goddard is another author that I just love reading his things. A little difficult to read. And Thomas Troward, again, a little difficult to read, but you have to read them multiple times to understand what they're saying. But the impact on the mind is really great. But then if I need something a little lighter, I'll go to John Gordon because he just can tell a story.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the things I know that the Potted Profile talks about you, Patricia, is that it labels you as the only mindset coach. And anytime that I hear only, I'm like, wait a minute, she's the only one that does it. So what makes you the only one that utilizes this innovative style and everything?
I came up with my own formula that I utilize with people. So while I use Bob's materials, I also have my own. So, I feel that there are 5 key ingredients that people need. And that is their thinking to create that bigger vision. So they need to think big. Then they need to play big. They need to shift their mindset so that they understand, like Brian was talking about, how to, think, with the mindset of a millionaire, let's say. And then they need to be big. They need to become the person that they need to be in order to accomplish their goals, because you can never outperform the image you hold of yourself. So the image you hold, if it's not on the level of your dream, you can't get there. You have to change your self-image first. You have to become that person. And then you have to know how to attract things. You have to know the law of attraction and how that will work for you. And then you have to become a leader. You have to be able to lead others and not, have people that want to follow you. So I feel that, you have those 5 things, you become unstoppable.
No, definitely. And actually that raises a couple of questions I'd like to hear from both of you about this. And then I wanted to come back to another question I'll read back to and everything. But the question that I have for both of you originally is, you just mentioned the word leader. And I'd love to hear both of your definitions of what makes a leader, because I'm always fascinated by people's ideas of what a leader is. So I guess I'll start with you, Patricia, since you brought it up as the definition of a leader, and then I'll come to Brian and get his definition of a leader, because different people have ideas of what a leader is.
To me, a leader is somebody that other people want to follow. And I think that we're all leaders in, no matter what area you are in a business, you are a leader. But to be the true leader, you have to have that why, and you have to get people to buy into it and want to follow you.
That makes a lot of sense. What about yourself, Brian? What is your definition of a leader? And I guess I'll segue into the other part of the question that I was going to ask, and you can answer this because it's going to bring it back to something Patricia said as well in terms of giving your answer. But I'd love to hear your definition of a leader. But the other part of what I was going to ask in context with that is how important are dreams to our reality? Because I am a believer in the concept of you have to create an idea in your mind, and some of that ideas might be in daydreams or in even real life night dreams and everything, but you have to dream what you want to be. But that's just to me a tactic that we don't do enough of. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on both of those in terms of what makes a leader and how that dream space exists in creating our manifest reality that we want to create.
Yeah, I would say one other, I agree with everything she said, but also as far as the leadership, an effective leader also helps facilitate, the dreams of others and helps them find their dreams as well. We can all dream together and, create, the common good and create more of the dreams that we all want when we're helping each other. So really an effective leader is someone who's helping and, looks for ways to serve and always thinking, how can I help them? As opposed to just, being the person who stands at the podium that everyone's supposed to worship and adore, but actually almost the opposite in a way. Like you want to help them get up to the podium too.
No, I definitely agree with you on that. What are your thoughts about the whole concept, Patricia, of manifesting our reality through our dreams?
That's how we do it. We use our imagination. And, it's our imagination is one of our intellectual faculties that we have. And it's so underutilized. And some of that goes back to teaching. Like, how many times do teachers say, stop daydreaming? Mm-hmm. And kids eventually figure out, oh, they're not supposed to daydream. And so I was always really careful. Once I learned this information, I was really careful. When I saw a child daydreaming, I never tried to shut them down. I'd always find another way, hey, I know you're in a wonderful place, but can you come back with me for just a minute? And that was a good way of letting them know that they were allowed to dream. That's how any invention was first thought in somebody's head. It was an idea in somebody's mind before it ever becomes a reality. So everything you see around you was somebody's idea first. And, then it became reality. And that's what we need to do. When we want to go after something, we first have that dream, we have that idea, and we start to develop it and think about it. And as we focus on that dream, we start to figure out how it's going to happen. We don't know the how when we first have the idea.
And that comes back to something that I feel that we do too much of and everything. And I'm sure both of you were probably agreeing. It comes back to something I was talking to Sam about when he was here and everything, which is that dream killer mentality or that crabs in the barrel mentality. I can't tell you how many times I've had friends that have had entrepreneurial ideas, and the people that are, ready to already poo-poo the idea before they've even heard what the idea is or how the person is going to structure the idea. Now, don't get me wrong, restaurants are very difficult. I'm just using that as an example to run a restaurant. And of course, they have a tremendous failure rate and everything. But at the same time, I'm not going to sit there and tell a man that if he wants to open up a seafood restaurant, that he should not pursue that dream. But I see a lot of people that have that mentality. They're like, no, don't open up your bookstore or open up your clothing store. It'll never fly. It'll never succeed. And they've got that crabs in the barrel dream killer mentality. So I just wondering both of your thoughts about that, because I see that way too often, even on a grand scale. Because I'm here in Durham, North Carolina, and we had one of the historical Black Wall Streets. There are several of them around the country, but we definitely had one. Tulsa had one, and I've heard people that say that when people have talked about recreating it, they're like, well, it can't be recreated. That was then. This is now. It can be done. And while it might be a different version of it, it might be an online version versus the version that they had, which is more of a structured neighborhood with structured buildings and everything. I'm not going to sit there and say that we can't create a new Black Wall Street, but I do hear people poo-pooing all kinds of ideas and things of that nature. So just wondering y'all's thoughts about that and how y'all deal with it. You heard me ask Sam that, but I just wanted to hear y'all's thoughts, because I do find way too often people have that crabs in the barrel mentality.
Yeah, I think with like basically being the middle class or working class, the values and the beliefs that you need to be safe and secure in those areas are pretty antithetical to how you need to think as an elite entrepreneur if you're going to have entrepreneurial success. And sometimes you just got to realize, like, they're not going to be your client. Don't expect them to be. and they're always gonna think differently because they're used to, the whole get a job, way of life. Like my mother, for example, I love her, but she was a nurse for 40 years and then she retired. And then she still thinks that because my father got a professor job that I could just take my doctorate to the HR department at any university and be guaranteed a tenure track job. Like there's a lot of people stuck in that last century mindset of how jobs and so forth worked, and they're not necessarily open to new ideas. They only want to support what's supposedly a guarantee. So when you're doing something entrepreneurial where you have to actually go out and do your own selling and do things, there's no guaranteed money right away, so that's scary to a lot of people, even if the paycheck at the actual guaranteed job is not as much.
No, I hear you. I'd love to hear Patricia's thoughts as well. But before we get to that tenure track is not as easy as folks think it is. I've actually got a good friend of mine who's been teaching probably for 20, 25 years at one of our local universities here. It's not the big university, which of course is Duke, but it is the other university, North Carolina Central University, that's here. And I can tell you that he's been going, I want to say, still on the year to year, 2 year to 2 year, and he's on a 3-year contract, but he's still nowhere near tenured. And you just noticed that I said that it's been several years. So he's probably been doing that for 20 or 25 years. And in my mind, that's the new trick that universities do, is that they give them on contract to contract basis, because tenure also means that you got to pay them more. So that's also a trick that academia is doing these days, is kind of basically, if I can use a relationship parallel, stringing people along. Just like people might get strung along in a relationship, you're being strung along in academia. At least that's what I've observed. I don't know if you've seen that same thing in the Midwest, in your case and everything, but definitely I've seen that here.
Yeah, I always tell people now, like, you can actually make more money teaching what's not being taught. Just, don't be afraid to be an entrepreneur doing it. But that's just that in and of itself, though, is a very scary thing. They feel more comfortable even on the clearly, subpar adjunct pay scale. But that's a different story for probably a whole other episode, I bet.
Yeah, agreed, definitely. Patricia, what is your thoughts about that crabs in the barrel mindset that I think too often people are ready to kill people's dreams? And like I said, I don't care whether it's opening up a restaurant or opening up a bookstore or a coffee shop or even a auto mechanic shop.
So there's a story that we use in the teachings I do with Bob Proctor called the 333 story. And in that story, it was a fundraiser that was going to happen, and they wanted to raise $3 million in 3 hours, 3 days from the day they were having this discussion. And so what they wanted to do was they wanted to make sure that they were only thinking of how they could make it happen, not how it couldn't happen. So if anybody threw out an idea in this group of people meeting that was not going to help them accomplish it, they would just say next. And so I think that's what we have to learn, is to just say next. When somebody throws an idea of negative, next, and go on and figure out, okay, how can you make that happen? And so I think there's so much negativity in the world. I mean, you don't have to go very far to get a negative comment or see something negative happening. And so that, we're kind of geared to being negative. So to get out of that, we have to just stay with what's positive and how we can do something, not how we can't do something. It's much easier to look at how something can't be accomplished than how something can be accomplished.
No, I definitely agree with you on that. It's just too easy to go into the negative mindset and things of that nature. And I think that people too often do that. For both of you, I was wondering, how important do you think it is for social media in terms of the business space, whether it's business coaching or just being an entrepreneur? Because I am seeing a lot of entrepreneurs using Clubhouse, using LinkedIn, using Facebook, using a number of other things to try to get their products out. I'm not always sure that they're doing it effectively. Like sometimes I see them going in there and making what sounds like connections, but then I'm not sure that they're doing the most important thing, which is to follow through. Because even if I make a connection on LinkedIn, I need to at least follow through, and I don't know that I see enough of that. I'm not saying it's not happening, but I probably would like to see more of it. But I'd love to hear your thoughts about social media as a tool within entrepreneurship.
I say it's a good tool. It's very helpful, but at the same time, it's one of those things where you got to go where your actual clients are. You can't just post something on Instagram for all of your clients, or mostly on LinkedIn or something like that. Or you got to go where the client is, and you got to prepare the content accordingly. but also there's a thing called vanity metrics. We always talk about, like, the likes you get on the post doesn't really matter. What matters is, are you going to get anybody actually direct messaging you? And also tell people too, like, don't just wait for your own people to like your stuff. Actually, if you like other people's stuff, that's when you might actually make the sale, because you're supporting their stuff. Then they might come and buy your product, kind of a thing. Like one of the things that I now use for my billing and booking is actually just the CEO of this company happened to like a few of my posts and shared it. And it's like, I liked what he was doing with this company, and then I became a customer. Pretty, simple process. But sometimes we expect to just make our own post and then that should be enough. And it's not usually how it actually works. And really, we have to, not just make the post, we got to have conversations and keep talking to people, because that's where the real magic can happen. And sometimes we're afraid to actually, try and talk to other people. We want to just, throw it out there and, hope that people will suddenly come to us. And, the way, our minds work and the way, things are with, the constant attention grabbing things that go on with your phone, it's hard to stay on one, app on the phone for more than a minute sometimes. So it's easy to get distracted from your train of thought that might, that might get you a client or whatever. So you have to not be afraid to follow up and keep on having conversations. And, sometimes you send 10 emails or 10 different contact points at some point before somebody will really be in the mood to, be thinking about buying. They got to have a chance to really get to know you. One post won't cut it.
I agree with you on that. Patricia, what is your thoughts about that? And if I can just add a twist into the conversation, I've been in some rooms and even in social media where it's also a concern about the way that us male folks, for lack of a better term, approach you women in those spaces, including the way that they sometimes don't even handle the business transaction and the business networking in a truly professional way. And I think that is a shame. And unfortunately, that happens in some of these business conversations, even in supposedly professional rooms. But I'd love to hear your thoughts about how social media has helped, and also social media etiquette, particularly around gender.
Yeah, so I do think you have to build the relationship. You're not going to just post something and attract a lot of people to you. It is all about the relationships. And I just kind of thought this was kind of funny, because I was reaching out to some people on LinkedIn that they had similar thought patterns as I did. I was looking at their comments, and so I was reaching out saying, I think we're like-minded. I'd like to connect with you. And so this is the opposite way, because there are times when I think if somebody connecting with me, it's just a little creepy sometimes,
Right.
But anyhow, I mean, this was a gentleman, and he said, why do you want to connect? I'm like, nothing creepy. I'm just, expanding my network, and thought, from your comment that you and I must think alike, and so I, enjoy being around like-minded people. And so I can't remember if you connect or not, but sometimes you get that, you do reach out to people, and then they, wonder why you're connecting. But there are times when males connect with me, and I'm like, I don't know who you are, and we don't have any friends that are the same, and why are you connecting with me? So yeah,
No, I
it
definitely
can make
agree with
me
you.
uneasy.
Yeah, definitely. That's what I've heard from some of my other friends in that space and in Clubhouse and in some of the other spaces where they were feeling uneasy, and it was almost like they were, in some cases, feeling like it was almost like a come on, or in some cases even like a catfish type deal, because unfortunately sometimes the catfishers will use the business community in order to harvest prospects, for lack of a better term, and everything. I know I've even been victim of that. I know that when I've called them out, because I'm one of those kind of guys that I will call the people or ask them for their telephone number, and some people are just kind of like unusually bold because they actually have called or have allowed me to call them, and I'm sitting there going, in like one case, it was supposed to be a young lady, and I'm sorry if I call you and you sound like a Nigerian male. I'm not buying you as a young lady anymore, because you're already exposed who you really are and everything. So I just found that to be hilarious. One, that they allowed me to give me a real number, and two, that they didn't even bother to try to masquerade their voice. Because I was sitting there going like, this is just totally insane and everything.
Yeah.
What has been some of the most unusual things, even in your business coaching, that you have found in terms of your world of business coaching? Because I'm sure that there are things that you're, even in your life, even to this day, you're going like, I can't believe that they asked me to do this or that. So I guess I'll start with you, Brian, and everything. So what is the most unusual thing that has happened to you in the business coaching space before I get to Patricia?
I think part of one unusual thing happened when I first started out is I had some people mistaking me for a business manager or for their agent for their performing and other stuff. And, sometimes you just got to really get clarity as to, let them know up front, at the top of the website, be clear as to what you're doing and not have them, somehow get some other idea, because there's a lot of different words out there. And also just the word coach, for that matter, means so many different things to different kinds of musicians in different contexts. And so, getting, when in doubt, you just got to get clarity to avoid some of those weird things, so people don't, enroll with you, then to realize that you're not what they thought they were.
No, I agree with you. And before I get to Patricia and her weirdest things, Brian, how important do you think it is to have a coach? Because I've actually had other people that are in that coaching space. I've actually do a show with a young lady who is a health coach, and she actually does a video game with me and Jacoby and Saren and everybody. It's called the Gamers Den, but definitely Kara is a certified health coach, and definitely will help you get your diets and things to that nature together. But I was just wondering, how important do you think it is to have a coach, and do you think that people understand the importance if you think it is important?
It's, we all can benefit from coaching in different ways almost all the time. And some people have multiple coaches at once, just because it's good to have that different eyes and ears and perspective that sometimes, we have the rosy colored glasses on, we don't see everything. And it also helps to, sometimes we need the accountability, we need, the other information and so forth. And, it's not always we can't always just read the book. You can't just always read Think and Grow Rich and solve all your life problems. You need somebody else also talk you through, different things depending on what you need in your life and business and so forth. So it's something where we need more of. And also, like, when I went to college expecting college to be the answer, and my professors to basically be the coaches that I would have in life. And then I graduate and they don't really respond to the emails. You wonder why. And, you need somebody else to, take you to the next step in life.
I hear you, and definitely agree with you on that. What about yourself, Patricia? How important do you think it is to have a coach, and the importance of just that coaching mentality?
Oh, I think it's really important to have a coach, because we don't see in ourselves what other people see. And I know even just a mentor, we don't even have to say a coach, but a mentor. I remember I was teaching some of the principals I had, like, they saw in me what I did not see in myself. Wow. And they kept putting me in these leadership positions. I'm thinking, why me? I'm the youngest one here. Why do you put me in a leadership? Because I didn't see myself as a leader. But they saw qualities in me that I, at that time, did not see in myself. And, they were great mentors. And I think it's really important, because a coach can draw things out of you that you don't even know you have, and, can find that potential and can help you, find those talents and skills that you have that you don't realize.
I hear you. Brian, you use a term in your bio that I had never heard used before, and I want you to actually clarify what you mean by, I've heard the term, the back two words of it and everything, but you use a term called the money glass ceiling. So definitely, what is a money glass ceiling, and is there a certain wealth or a certain amount of money or percentage of money of our income? Because of course I've heard people, even when we're thinking about rent, say that you shouldn't pay more than, I think it's a third or something like that of your salary in rent. And if you're doing more than that, you probably have a recipe for disaster and things along those lines. And I'm probably not giving the right figure, but I know it's a set percentage and everything. But I was just wondering if you could explain a little bit about the money glass ceiling, and also just budgeting in general, some of the things that you talk about with your business clients.
Yeah, part of the money glass ceiling basically is that we all have an artificial number in our head that we can't think we can get higher than ever. And it's about breaking through that, especially like whatever you're used to making, that's usually your salary set point. And it's hard to get, beyond that sometimes. Even if you do have a good month, then you might revert to the mean the next month if you, are stuck in a rut and doing the same thing over and over again. So it's partly that is, overcoming the fear of actually earning more and, putting yourself in position to actually make those sales and those other, offerings that will bring that additional income into your life, and doing it without shame, because the more you have, the more good you can do in the world. And have to remind people that too sometimes.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And what is your thoughts about, are you seeing enough of your business clients actually doing that correct percentage of budgeting? And I just used the example of rent But I also sometimes wonder if business people are doing enough even with office space. And of course, now a lot of people, their office space is their house. But, I'll sometimes wonder if people are even doing the percentages when it should come down to how much they should do for, say, food and how much they should do for board and things of that nature. And that's just on the day-to-day survival rate. We're not even thinking about the business survival. But I was just wondering your thoughts on that. If you've seen enough people in the entrepreneurial and business spaces doing enough around that, even planning whether they want to be in their office or do their office from their house.
Well, one thing I do is I help clients get to clarity as to how much they need to make to begin with, and then reverse engineer whatever it takes to get that, so that then they're not going to hopefully worry about being homeless and not having the office space and so forth. So sometimes it's a matter of setting the goals high enough that includes all of those expenses and not just what you think is a safe number to aim for. And sometimes that might mean you need to create a product or service that will be, even bigger for a certain kind of client, so you can actually bring more revenue in. Or you might need to teach more students, in a certain kind of way with less time or whatever. So be open to those other possibilities so you can actually afford to pay for whatever it is you need to pay for. But otherwise, I like to say I don't stay getting my clients' wallets, because that's just, I'm not a financial planner or a financial advisor. And that's another bizarre thing that's happened in my business. Some people expect that. And it's like, that's not what I do. I'm helping you earn enough to not have to, to hopefully, you can hire somebody to worry about all that stuff later on. Part of mine's with the earning, not the planning.
Yeah, that makes sense. But I know just in terms of financial planning and business coaching, I have heard some people have this theory, even, and I'd like to hear both of your thoughts on this, even with like if they're working a 9 to 5 and they want to go into the entrepreneurship space, that they feel that they've got to have a certain amount of money in, say, either their bank account or in their reserves before they're ready to move out into the space and everything. And then there are other people that are like, no, sometimes you just got to jump into the water and see if you can learn to swim and everything and have that philosophy. But I was wondering, in both of your cases, which do you think is the better means to go? Kind of that safety era of, waiting until I've, say, got 3 or 4 paid salaries in my bank account before I decide to go launch a mini newspaper, or, and I'm just using that as an example, or a bookstore or whatever? Or do you sometimes feel that it's just better to tell the folks, jump into the water and hopefully you'll manage to at least, if not swim, float to the other side and everything, so you won't exactly drown? But definitely, I was just wondering y'all's philosophy and which one you feel is better. So I guess I'll start with you, Brian, and then go to Patricia.
Yeah, I'd just simply say, do you have a paying customer? Do you have somebody who's ready to pay you money for what you're offering? Until you have that, you don't have a business.
Wow, that makes sense. Patricia, I'd love to hear your thoughts. And speaking of having a business, how important do you think it is to have a full business? Because I oftentimes hear people will say that they have a business, but then they don't necessarily have a business license. Like they haven't gone to the state departments, and different states have different ones that are in charge of that, but they haven't got their business license, or they haven't got the kind of paperwork that says that they're a business. So, there are tons of what I call computer businesses and mind businesses, meaning that they are, and I mean, they're collecting money. So in that sense, they are a business, but they haven't got the official state qualification of being a business. So how important do you think it is to have that, and then kind of piggyback on what Brian was saying to his answer?
Well, I think it's probably good to have your regulations, whatever your state has for business. I think that's important to do, and to be able to file the taxes and so on that you need to take care of. So I think that's important. I also think that it's not a wise decision to just cut and jump into something else, because that puts a lot of pressure on you. You need to make sure that your needs are met, your housing, your food, and so on. I even had a client, it was a small construction company when I started working with them, and the wife owned the construction company. The husband was working, had a job, and he wanted to leave that job. And it was like, he got really discouraged one day and said, I think I'm just going to quit now. And I'm like, no, I don't think so. Let's just stay with the plan, which was like 3 or 4 months down the road was when he was going to leave that job. He said, let's not do this now. Let's make sure that you're prepared so that you don't regret it and you don't have problems. And so he stayed the course, and that was the right decision. So, I think sometimes we get anxious and want to jump, but, you know, we do need to have that, be able to take that leap of faith, but we also have to do it wisely.
Speaking of leaps of faith, and I'm afraid that some people may be, and we be stepping into a quagmire of a topic this time and everything, but we had a lot of businesses that definitely got the relief, got the support that they needed during this coronavirus pandemic and everything. And of course, there are people out there now that are saying that, you know, what happens now that the relief is gone, and will they be able to survive? And definitely, we know that in the restaurant business, a lot of them have failed and a lot are continuing to fail. So I was just wondering, do you too feel that the government is doing enough to support the businesses, and should government even play that role and everything? And do you think that it's something that was all right for the pandemic, but maybe not as much now that we're coming out of the pandemic? But I was just wondering both of your thoughts about that, because I've heard just in my own peer group and everything, conversations around that, where some of the business people are glad that they got their you know, their money from the federal government, but some are also concerned as to whether they will be able to pay their folks. And of course, even in the service industries, I've seen people that are like, too many people aren't coming to even get jobs, even though the jobs are out there in some cases, because they can make more money. At least the argument is they can make more money staying at home. So I do know that even in the service industries like restaurants and some other things, there are people that don't even want the jobs. Like I was reading a recent news story where some of our swimming pools weren't even able to find lifeguards during the summer because folks weren't feeling that they were going to make enough money in that space, and that they might be able to make more doing what they're doing in terms of collecting either unemployment or other benefits, whether that's the stimulus money or whatever. But I was wondering y'all's thoughts about government helping business and whether it's being done enough of. I'll start with you, Brian.
The business I've been to, like I've been to restaurants where if the employees are paid well, it's a thriving business and it doesn't look like it'll shut down. But there are other ones where, you know, that's like the services, if it's, you know, is it really the problem with the lack of employees, or is it just the lack of them willing to pay? You know, that's something we got to not be afraid to, you know, think about sometimes. And I always tell people that, you know, as long as you're paying enough to help them, you know, live and so forth, like you gotta at least, you know, be able to pay that, or else it's not a business, it's a hobby, you know, to be able to pay a living wage and pay enough to actually, you know, support the people. And so I think, I don't know, I try to stay out of the politics with it sometimes, but when in doubt, I just go back to the science of getting rich. And are the people giving you more in use value than what you're getting in cash value, and those basic principles of natural laws. And, you know, if you follow those laws, then any business can, you know, find a way to create enough revenue streams to stay in business and so forth. And really with the internet these days, like any business can create some other revenue stream beyond just the main, you know, part of the restaurant. You could sell some other apparel or sell some other things, or, you know, partner up with other, you know, opportunities. Like, for example, there are people who are performing artists looking for opportunities to perform now. And, you know, you could, you know, bring in a crowd and bring more people to your restaurants by having that band do some performing or something like that. So, you know, the options are out there, and sometimes we're afraid to innovate for some reason, though.
No, I'd love to hear Patricia's thoughts about what I said as well. If I can add some more context to it, I know that I've had some friends that have done business live streams, business Facebook lives and things in the African American space. And one of the complaints that they have is that a lot of the minority businesses are actually really solo businesses, meaning they're solopreneur businesses, and they don't really hire anybody. So they're not really fully businesses. I mean, they are businesses in the sense of having a budget and things of that nature, but they don't necessarily hire a staff. So they're not, it's really like one man or maybe family operations, but it's not like you're creating a economy within the society, because it's a very small economy. It's like a family-owned business, or you being the solopreneur, like maybe a tax accountant or something of that nature. I'm just using the tax accountant as an example. And also, and too often not having the generational wealth of even having a plan where you're going to pass the business from one generation to the other. Like I grew up in a rural part of North Carolina, and I saw that there were generational plans historically, say within the farm. So, you know, the son might know that he was going to go, or the daughter, into farming, and it might even go for several generations, but then there's less of that. And I could even argue that it's not even a minority thing. I'm just seeing less of that in society as well. But I was just wondering, do you think that we're doing enough generational planning, even outside of what the government may be doing as well, in terms of generational planning and making sure that the business is sustainable? Patricia?
Oh, is that for me? Okay, sorry. I don't know. I mean, I hear a lot of different things about, you know, like farming and so on, and, you know, the taxes and the, you know, capital gains. And I think it's unfortunate that that would keep them from keeping it in the family. I did feel like during the pandemic that the government picked winners and losers, and I didn't think that was right. I thought a lot of small businesses could have opened and succeeded very well because they would care about the cleanliness of their business more than a big box store was capable of doing. So I felt like it was unfortunate. So, and I know it's hard to get workers back. I mean, there's help wanted signs all over the place. And I don't know the answer to that one.
Yep, I hear you. Brian, what is your thoughts about that whole concept of generational wealth and us trying to at least pass the businesses down no matter what part of society you are in? I know that was even an issue out of Detroit where you are from and everything. And also just this whole kind of concept of a lot of communities creating solopreneur businesses. So, I mean, that's fine while you're living and you're trying to create wealth for yourself. But I do sometimes wonder in terms of it being a model to create growth within the community, greater growth within the community. So I'm just wondering your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what, not really usually used to think about it. So it's one of those things where, hopefully we can, make it so that the generation can transfer over to the next generation and transfer that wealth over. But I don't know. I'm not really sure. I can't think of anything else to say about that. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Like I said, I just raise different things and thoughts and get people's ideas. And if folks don't have thoughts, and that's cool too. I mean, that's part of it's like a regular dinner party. So if you ask you something at a dinner party, you don't always have that answer. It's not like mandatory. We just continue eating whatever food we're having at the moment. So it's like any other dinner party. So I'm perfectly fine with a non-answer answer. So that's perfectly.
One thing about generational wealth, though, it's worth pointing out, though, like people born after 1980 and onward, at this point in their life, they have less wealth than their parents and grandparents had at the same time. So we definitely do have, generational wealth gap that we got to somehow address.
Yeah, I definitely think that that's something we've got to address. And I know even on some of our news programs, we've talked about how we've got to do that in that education space. Because like I said before, I know that both of our founders are very big about having these kind of conversations, even in the school systems. And one of the things that I raised on our news edition, which I sometimes help with as well, which is every morning at 10, is that I remember, and I still see it on TV, like in some of the old episodes, when folks of different jobs would go into the school system to talk about what they do, whether that's the policeman, the fireman, the business owner, the pharmacist, whatever the job might be. And sometimes it might even be the students' parents that were coming in there. But, I'm not sure, and I've got to check with my younger brother to see if it's still going on. But it doesn't seem like it's going on as much as it used to. And I'm thinking part of that is probably because of different cuts and everything. But it does seem to me that it was a common thing definitely before the 70s and even in the 80s and 90s. But in the 2000s, I'm not seeing enough of that. And I'm also not seeing enough of like business types that are doing successful things coming in to share their stories of success and how they became successful with the school kids. And I would even argue that they're not doing enough of that even in the bigger schools like higher education, definitely not in high school, and in some cases not even in colleges and JUCO. So that's just something that I would like to see more of. But I was wondering, as business coaches, is that something that y'all would like to see more of, even if people were inviting y'all to come into classes to talk about some of the lessons that you have learned from your entrepreneurs?
I think that'd be great to do that. And the reason I say that is when I was teaching, the push was every kid should go to college. Right. Well, that's just not true. And, I always felt, this was in elementary school. We were pushing every kid to go to college. And I remember some of the kids I had were almost embarrassed to say, this one kid said, I don't know if you know what a pub is, but I'd like to own a pub. And I'm like, well, then do it, and he said, I don't really want to go to college. And then I had some others one guy wanted to be a chef and his grandmother wouldn't let him be a chef. And, it's just, there's so many things out there that people can do. And that push that everybody had to go to college, I think really hurts us as a country, because there's a lot of jobs out there that you don't need a college education for. And experience can give it to you. And this comes from somebody who's from a family that everybody went to college, and it's just, it's just not for everybody.
We don't have the jobs today and the numbers to justify the way the colleges are. The jobs that most degree programs are designed around don't exist in enough numbers too. There's also that.
Mm-hmm.
That's an interesting point. And the other thing that I've heard, and it comes back to hybrid education, with people doing, I understand that this coming semester here in North Carolina, most of the folks will be going to in-person classes. But when they were going a lot of computer classes, then people were even wondering what was going to happen to the buildings. And I'm still arguing that even to this day, because I don't know that everybody's going to be in the classes all the time, which means that, if you built like this big, massive college, like I'm literally around the block from Duke University and not that far from the UNC, that's a whole lot of office space that could be used, or just space even to deal with the homeless situation if they're going to be sitting there half empty and things of that nature. Because even to this day, I was talking to a friend of mine that had actually just recently come back from visiting New York, like in the last week or two, and they were saying that a lot of, it was easy to cross the street. And I remember the images of New York where, if you tried to cross the street, if you weren't trying to flag down a taxi, you might be getting run over. But apparently it's really easy to cross the street, and there was still a lot of empty office spaces. And that's supposed to be one of our financial capitals. And I've heard the same thing in LA and other places. So I was just wondering if you feel that there might be the possibility that even those big colleges and things might have a lot of open space. So that could be even a business opportunity. So, Brian, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, definitely. There's always something that can be repurposed, and they could always rent it out to other firms or other people, who want to use the space. Or if all else fails, solve the homeless problem that we have in LA right now. That would be great.
That would be a great thing and everything. I am a big fan of repurposing, because I know that here in North Carolina, and it actually comes to another topic that I know we don't have to deal with on this show, but it comes down to gentrification and how that goes on. But I know here that we had in Durham a lot of tobacco buildings, and a lot of those tobacco buildings have been turned into offices, restaurants, and in some cases apartments. So definitely they were repurposed, because of course tobacco is no longer king, and definitely is a not as big of a cash crop as it was way back when. So definitely they had to turn it into something. And Durham isn't the only one. I think Winston-Salem was doing that. Richmond has done it. A number of other places that had a lot of tobacco type style buildings, they just repurposed them into new buildings and new styles. And some of the apartments are very beautiful, as well as some of the office complexes that have been built in that space and everything. I had forgotten to ask you, Patricia, where exactly was your teaching at, and where are you based at now? Because like I said, I know that Brian's got those LA and Detroit connections, but I was trying to remember where you were based at also. I know we've talked on email and of course on Potted, but I could not remember the exact location.
So I taught in Washington County, Maryland. Mm-hmm. And I actually live in Pennsylvania, so I'm kind of like right on the border of Pennsylvania and Maryland.
Gotcha. Maryland's also had a great history, and of course, Pennsylvania's got Philadelphia and all of that great kind of history there. I actually, as a sports aside, I root for certain teams based on having allegiances. Like I told you before, I was, or I might have mentioned it, I was a Minnesota Vikings fan, and that was way back in my high school years. I became a Brewers fan when I went to Marquette and everything. But when it comes to basketball, I sometimes follow certain people. So I follow Doc Rivers because me and Doc Rivers went to school. So over the last several years, I have been a Philadelphia 76ers fan since he has been their coach. Before that, I was a Clippers fan because I kind of follow rooting for whoever he's coaching. So I don't really have a dog in this fight, even though Jay Crowder did go to Marquette, but Marquette is in Milwaukee. So this time I don't really have a dog in the fight. But whenever I think of Maryland, I think about some of like the innovative politicians. Like one of y'all's politicians was even about possibly legalizing marijuana. I think that was Comey and everything. And then of course, Philadelphia, you think about, the cradle of democracy and things of that nature. And that's just some of the things that I think about in addition to some of the sports franchises and the whole debate around. Oh, and of course, Maryland also has great seafood and of course, some pretty good music scene as well. And DC created that go-go sound. So those are some of the things that I think about, of course, DC, Maryland being political and everything. But what are some of the things that you think of when you think of both DC, Maryland, and Philadelphia, and some of like what I asked Brian, the misconceptions that you think that people have of those regions? Because this is an international pod TV. It used to be international broadcast media, and we still use that moniker as well sometimes. But it is definitely international because we have folks listening in Australia, South Africa, Nigeria, and a number of other places around the world. So what are some of the misconceptions that you think people have of your region?
So one of the misconceptions is when you live in Pennsylvania, they'll say, "Oh, are you near Philadelphia or Pittsburgh?" And I say neither. I'm actually closer to Baltimore, Maryland, or Washington, D.C. So when we look at sports teams, my family kind of goes towards Washington. So that's one of the big misconceptions. I love Philadelphia and the historic part of the town. I remember when we went into some of the places, you could sit where John Hancock sat or where Thomas Jefferson sat. And, it's just fun to be wandering the streets thinking of, oh, Ben Franklin walked on these same sidewalks, and it's just kind of a really good feeling to feel good about our country. And when I think of Washington, 2 of my kids live in the Washington area, so tend to go down that way. And it's just a great place because I love our country. I think it's the greatest country in the world, and I feel grateful to have been born here instead of some other countries where I would not want to live. So I think the history is just wonderful.
No, I definitely am a big fan of history and definitely enjoy that and everything. And speaking of architecture in DC, one of the Durham legends is Theo Freelon, and he passed away many years ago. I believe it was of Lou Gehrig's disease, if I'm remembering correctly. But he was one of the lead architects for the African American History Museum, and actually, I believe it's the Raleigh Chamber of Commerce is going to give an award, and they're taking nominations now around inclusivity, diversity, and things that he was very passionate about when he was living. And his wife, his widow now, is a famous jazz singer, Nina Freelon, and his son is a somewhat equally, if not quite as equally famous hip hop artist named Pierce Freelon, and they also have an artist in the family, Maya. But definitely, I am hoping that the people will be learning about this award and definitely continuing his legacy by having this award named after him. Because when I found out about it a couple of weeks ago, I was definitely glad that they were doing that, and I'm actually thinking of submitting some people to get the award, because I think the deadline is, if not this month, next month. But definitely, it was just great seeing that was going on. So I just want to give him a shout out, and I definitely need to get to that museum, even though it's been there built for a while. I haven't gotten to it. I did go to the first election of Barack Obama, and I did go to the I think it was the Native American Museum and also the Aerospace Museum. There might have been one other one, because we had to wait for the line to clear out, because there was a whole lot of people at that inauguration. So I had to wait to get on the I think we were doing the subway to get to my friend that I was dating at the time, to her family and everything. So I remember just spending a lot of time in those museums while we were waiting for the crowd to thin out. I also remember Katie Couric kind of going by us, because I remember the folks were like, I think that's Katie Couric, and that's exactly who it was.
Yeah.
And she was chasing down a news story and everything.
It was funny. I was on a flight back from, my one daughter lives in Florida, and I was coming back and I was flying into Washington, and these people, they were so excited because they were seeing the monuments out the window. And, I kind of was amused because obviously they'd never been to Washington, but there's just something really exciting about seeing all that, the monuments, and, recognizing the buildings that maybe you've seen on TV, but not seen in person. So,
no, I definitely agree with you. It's just great seeing that space, and I love going to historical places. I also love going to places and actually seeing the real image. Like, I know I went for the first time, I think it was about 2.5 years ago, on my first cruise, and we went to the Grand Turks and Puerto Rico and a couple of other places that are closer to the United States and everything. And that was a little bit too touristy in my mind. So next time I go, I definitely want to go and actually spend time in the real population and everything. And that actually was going to come to the question I had for both you and Brian, which is, like I said, this is an international platform. So we do have people around the world, including my buddy Shaquille out of Australia. So is there a part of the world, maybe not to live, because I agree with you that I do love America and love being here and everything, but is there a part of the world that you haven't visited yet that you would like to go to, or is there a part that you have traveled to that really impressed you? So I'll start with you, Brian. Is there a part of the world, because who knows, maybe it's a part that one of our listeners and or associates is associated with. So is there a part of the world that you would like to visit that you haven't, or is there a part of the world that you've been to that you were really impressed by? So it's actually
Yep.
a two-part question.
Well, Australia is a place that I definitely want to eventually go to pretty soon. Got to check that country out. I've heard great things about it and great people. Everyone I know from Australia is amazing and wonderful to meet. And then there's also, wouldn't mind going to Alaska, try and have the experience of spending a summer and a winter there, or at least, a few days in the summer and winter. See what it's like having, the day being short, and also as long, what it's like this time of year with hardly any darkness. But also, sorry, what was the other part of the question? Where else to go in the world?
What parts of the places that you have gone to that really impressed you? So it was one places that you hadn't been to. So you haven't been to Alaska and you haven't been to Australia, but places you've been to that really impressed you.
Yeah, I was impressed when I first went to the Grand Canyon in Arizona. I went to graduate school in Arizona, so took a road trip up to the Grand Canyon to check that out. And it's an amazing place to see in person. And then also Yosemite and the other national parks all around in the Rocky Mountain West. They're amazing and breathtaking. Everybody should try and, check out as many of them as possible. And also I went to China 7 years ago, and just, the culture there, and just experiencing, totally different food, different other stuff, but the humanity is the same everywhere you go. That's one thing I've noticed everywhere I've been around the world so far.
No, I definitely agree with you. The humanity is the same. One of the things that I love about what happens in humanity, I mean, I love it, but it also sometimes irks me, and then I'm going to get to Patricia and some of the places that she would like to go globally, is that whenever there is a world disaster, we've seen it during the pandemic, we saw it during 9/11, we saw it during Katrina, everybody comes together, everybody is very much unified. We also observe things that we should be observing all the time anyway, like I think Patricia mentioned it earlier in this interview, Mother Nature and what's around us and everything, including the ways that we've impacted it, and also just kind of like paying attention to what they're doing when we're cooped up and everything. So I'm definitely glad to see that happen whenever we get into these disasters, whether it's a long-range one like a pandemic, or something that's more of a terrorist thing like 9/11, or something that's a short-lived disaster. I mean, earth-shattering disaster, but still short-lived in the sense of how long it takes it, like something like Katrina. But then what hurts me sometimes is that then we go back to our ways as usual, meaning that we become very humanitarian during the time of the disaster and love everybody. But then after the disaster is over, we're back at each other's throats and not having that same kind of feeling that I wish was more unified. But then again, I'm also the guy that is a big fan of Imagine by John Lennon and Michael Jackson's Man in the Mirror. So I might be a little bit more of a not of a what do you call it, a utopian kind of person than the average person, or I might be one of those folks that likes to dream in the sky, to kind of put it in a Bob Dylan kind of way and everything. But definitely that's kind of just my hopes and everything. But now that I've got off on a little bit of a diatribe, Patricia, what are your thoughts about the places that you would like to visit that you haven't visited globally? Because like I said, oh, and by the way, Brian, Shaquille is always glad to talk to people, and possibly even, who knows, I'll see if I can't get him to host you in Australia. He used to own a couple of hedge funds, but I think he recently sold one, and he recently bought a greyhound, and he actually was winning with the greyhound. I think the last race he lost, but he had bought a greyhound and was doing that greyhound circuit. And I think I recently heard that he had bought a racehorse as well. So he's doing pretty well financially, but he's also somewhat bored right now, as my friend Nick, who is part of this network, said, because he doesn't have as much to do as he did when he was running 2 hedge funds. So Patricia, what are some of the things that you would like to have happen as well?
I love to travel. And when my daughter was down in the island of St. Vincent, she was in medical school there.
Oh, wow.
And I understand what you're saying about being with the people, because we decided we're going to travel like the people that live on the island. Right. And, so we were in these, vans stuffed in them, 15 people sometimes, and stop signs for suggestions. But, it was like, let's experience what the people experience. So that was a lot of fun. Different than when we cruised the islands and, we were doing the touristy thing. So love Paris, went to Paris, absolutely. Thought the people were wonderful there. I know we don't always hear that, but I thought they were wonderful. Love Germany and Switzerland. Been very disappointed in that we had a cruise for the Mediterranean planned for this summer, where we were going to go to England and go to London, and that was canceled. So then we decided to book a cruise to New Zealand and Australia, and that too was canceled. So, wish this pandemic would end, and so we could actually travel. Been to a lot of places in the United States, Grand Canyon, out in the California and the West Coast. Did a tour down the West Coast, which was a lot of fun. So love to travel. Yeah.
Yeah, traveling is wonderful. I need to do more of it. I have barely done any international travel, even though when I was young, like an infant, I did go to Turkey because Dad was stationed in the Air Force. I think Mom told me I might have been like around 2 or 3 months old and was there until I was like 3 or something like that. So, like I said, that and the cruise is the extent of my international travel. So I need to do much more of that. And I've actually got friends around various parts of the globe. So I actually need to do it, just one, to visit them, and two, just to kind of like get that mindset of seeing what the rest of the world is like and everything.
Yeah.
And I've done pretty decent in the United States, even though I need to do better with the West Coast, because I haven't hit enough of LA, even though I've got friends in the film industry and some of the other industries that are out there as well. But I haven't quite hit the California, Washington, Oregon strip of states, and there was a couple of others out there. I did go to Las Vegas recently to visit that same friend that I went on the cruise with. I was somewhat disappointed by Las Vegas because, like I said, I didn't really hit the strip, but maybe it's just the fact that as soon as you step off the plane, they're trying to grab you with gambling right off the plane.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a little bit too much of a
In the
gamble.
airport.
Right, they try to grab you right at the airport.
Yeah.
You can't even get out before they ever try to grab you and get your money.
Yep.
I was not used to that, so that might have thrown me off. And definitely it's a different kind of heat, because it was even, I think, a little bit warm when I was there, and that might have been close to Christmas, New Year's of about a couple of years ago. But yeah, I was not and also dusty. It's a very dusty area that I don't also remember. But they had some cool stuff. I did go to one of their performance spaces and found it really interesting and all of that. So definitely there are places that I need to get more to that I have not gotten to. But I'm with you on Australia and New Zealand. I've heard some really amazing things about New Zealand, even though I've heard that some of the animal life is you have to be careful around some of the animal life. I just put it that way, because I've heard there's some animals that you don't want to step on them because they might take you out of here. But definitely,
my daughter was in New Zealand when the pandemic hit, so she lost half her vacation in New Zealand. Was very disappointed.
Wow. Speaking of the pandemic,
had to get a flight to get out and get home.
Wow. Speaking of the pandemic, how did the pandemic impact your business? Because actually, this network was created partially out of the pandemic, because part of what was going on was that they had some shows existing, like I think a fantasy football show, a couple of other shows, and then they were hearing about this virus that was coming from other parts of the country before it hit the United States, or other countries before it hit the United States. So they basically started doing a series of news programs around the pandemic that became daily, and then some other programs kind of spun away from that. And that's kind of how the network was birthed, and it's been around for about, total around for several years, or at least 5 or 6. But in terms of being more of a concrete kind of business, probably about 2. But definitely, it was birthed quite the bigger part of it out of the pandemic. So just in terms of your own business coaching, how did the pandemic impact you, and how did you work around it? Because we have been in the middle of it, as Patricia just said, for 18 months. So I guess I'll start with you, Brian. How did you work around the pandemic, and how did it impact what you were doing?
Yeah, I had to basically get clarity on really who my ideal client is, and who, I had to go from, a broader client pool to something more narrow, where I knew for sure what exactly I had to offer would help those people, and, people who expect to make the investment that would carry me through, the pandemic, if that makes any sense. So I really had to, really hone in on that and get that kind of clarity, and help my own clients then get their clarity too, so they can do the same thing. It's kind of, it's the rising tide lifts all boats kind of thing, where you just each helping each other. So, and also just let go of the people that we're really not meant to serve anyway. Sometimes we try to serve too many people, and we try to be all things for all people. And, if you're all for everything for everyone, you're actually nothing, or something like that, or whatever the expression goes. So, don't be afraid to just, unapologetically focus on who you're meant to serve, and, allow God or the universe to take care of those that you can't quite serve, even though you want to.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Patricia, how did the pandemic impact your business? I know you just said that you really wanted to be over, and I'm with you on that and everything, but how did it impact you, and how did you get around whatever the impact was?
Well, I definitely had to pivot my business. I reached out to people because there's so much fear, and try to help them through that. So I did some group coaching programs that were there to help people, and they really appreciated that. The one good thing I think that came out of it was that people became very comfortable with using like Zoom to do coaching with, which I've been trying to get some of my clients to do that. And there was such resistance. Oh, it's just not the same if you're not there together and talking. It's like, yeah, it is. It can be very much the same. So that was a good thing that came out of it, is people became very comfortable with doing things over the, computer.
Yep, definitely people became more comfortable doing that, and definitely we even heard people going to other exotic places and even doing their businesses there because they could. Because I heard of people even like moving to like Bali and other places and basically running their businesses out of these exotic locations because they might have had the resources. I'm not saying that everybody can do it, but if they got the resources, they were able to literally pivot their businesses to entire other countries and basically become almost like expatriates doing business from wherever these island places were. But I definitely heard of at least two people that were doing that, including some folks that went off to like some of the Far East countries and were doing like teaching jobs. Because one of the words that you just used that I heard a lot during the pandemic, and I'm still hearing a lot now, is this whole concept of pivoting. Because I think a lot of people have found their true passions now, even in terms of the kind of jobs they want, because they were sitting at home and they had a chance to do that reflective thing that we should be doing regularly anyway. Because I am a big believer in not just doing reflections one time and stopping, but doing that self-analysis and re-self-analysis. Because I think that you don't need to just have one kind of like epiphany where you realize who you are at that particular time. But I think that we're always changing just as human beings and as individuals. So I'm one of those people that believes that you can definitely kind of like have that remanifestation of whatever your dream is on a regular basis. So I did hear a lot of people talking about that and having that pivot space in. But I'm imagining that a lot of y'all heard that same thing, even within your business coaching, where people were doing a lot more pivoting and discovering who they were. So would you agree with that, Brian, that you were hearing a lot of people that were rediscovering who they were and even deciding to say they wanted to open up that business that they had always been dreaming of as high school kids? Maybe they had a food truck in their mind, but now they had their time on their hands. They were actually able to begin the process of buying the food truck, getting the food truck, and launching the food truck. Or maybe they had a bookstore that they wanted to open, and they were just deciding to go ahead and put the wheels in motion. So I did hear a lot of people pivoting and starting to put wheels in motion, even to the point of writing that first book that they always wanted to write.
Yep, I know people who wrote books and did other things that they otherwise would not have had time to, thanks to the pandemic. And a chance to really reflect and realize, do I really want to stay in this matrix that really doesn't make me happy anyway? We're kind of giving ourselves permission to ask that question. So it's a good thing.
Definitely. What are some of the things that you've seen folks do? I guess I'll start with Patricia and then I'll come back to you, Brian, that as they were pivoting, you were glad that they pivoted or they shared their story of their pivot, and it was something that was inspiring to you. So what are some pivots that you heard about that were inspiring to you? So I guess I'll start with you, Patricia, and then come down to Brian, because I'm always fascinated by when people hear about pivots, how it impacts them as well.
I think for some people, they decide to try something different. I had some clients that left the job they were in and went to another one. I had others that just decided to change some of the things they were doing. And then for others, I think they started to realize that family was also very important, and that maybe they needed to spend more time there.
No, I agree with you on that. I did see a lot of people kind of come back in tune with their family situations. I mean, sometimes that can also be a double-edged sword, because I also saw some people that might have gotten a little bit too close to each other and realized that they didn't really like each other as well. So I think that can be a double-edged sword, because some people might have been like, I thought I liked you, but now I've got to spend 24 hours with you, and I've been doing this for now almost 18 months. Maybe we need to head to the divorce court. So, Brian, what are some of the specific examples that you've heard about that really inspired you, even when you were hearing about some of your business coaches and some of the things that they were doing that inspired you as you were hearing about what they were doing in that pivot space?
Yeah, I've had a lot of clients who basically they're voice teachers or other teachers and do other services where they can feel at ease now having literally the whole world as potential clients, as opposed to people who just live nearby them. and they're, getting comfortable with teaching online and realizing they can do a whole lot more and really be at scale, doing what they want to do and serve a lot more people. And they can make more money without even leaving their home now.
Yep, definitely. I agree with you on that. Brian, one of the other things that I've talked to my musician friends about on this show and other shows, but I'd love to hear your perception from a business side. But we oftentimes talk about how a lot of people are very good at the show side. And I've even had this conversation with my dad, who's a visual artist, and he's actually good at what I'm getting ready to describe, but they're not always that great at the business side. And there is a reason, even in opera singing, that they call it show business. But I've seen where they're really good at the show side, but then when it comes down to the business side, not as much. In some cases, they might go get a coach, and in some places, they try to wing it. And we know that winging it doesn't really work. So I just wondered your thoughts about show business as an industry and our show business people or our creatives actually learning the business side and not just the show side as a person that has worked in that opera space in the past.
Yeah, one thing is we have a lot of people who just basically they're trained to only be perfect at their craft and not have to do anything else. And, they just think I can show up and sing pretty and look pretty and nothing else matters. And it's there's still people to this day, even when it's obvious you need to have more skills and be able to know more about the business. They think that just need to be perfect with what they're doing and that's it. But, you got to know the money part. You got to know the other things. You have to know how to really create your own opportunities because there's not enough existing opportunities the way we're trained for. We have to be open to creating new things. And that's learning some business skills and, getting, better in those areas that we otherwise didn't get much, training in with our actual schooling.
No, I agree. And the other thing that I oftentimes see people doing and everything is that they will get the big windfall of cash. We've seen it with the lottery winners. We've definitely seen it with NBA and
We lost him?
Oh, I think so. So, Brian, you're in Detroit?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was expecting a phone call, but that's all right. I'm happy to be here. So pleasure to meet you too.
Yes. So who do you work with? Do you work with a lot of voice teachers? Is that?
Most of my clients have been voice teachers and also coaches and adjacent service providers in the arts. And I'm also starting broadening out helping people in other areas because so many people just need help like with that whole communication, money in the sales and, being comfortable doing that stuff. It's crazy how even, I could go to a car dealership and help I've never sold a car, but I could help train a salesperson to actually relate to people. It's crazy how they know these things, but things of that sort. But, especially most of my clients are, of the arts and like former professors or professors who want to get out of academia because the academy is what it is, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how about you?
So I do coaching with the mindset. I work with small business owners and entrepreneurs, sometimes salespeople. I've had a couple clients that were in sales.
That's great. And how did you learn about Proctor? Because actually I learned about him first 2 years ago.
So I stumbled upon him. I'd heard his name like for years, but I never come across him. And so I just kind of stumbled upon him one day and I was like, this guy knows what I'm missing. And then a few months later, I joined as one of, his coaching clients and then went to become a consultant.
That's great.
But he's amazing.
Definitely
he's really amazing.
Learning more of that material. It's really, really wonderful stuff.
Yeah.
Computer did something crazy, so I don't know what it did. I don't know how much of the question you heard or if you even had a chance to answer it, but I was just saying that I'm oftentimes, saddened when I hear about those athletes and entertainers that are winding up being broke because they haven't done enough of that financial planning and learning about that financial planning and things of that nature. Because oftentimes you hear about this, and I've even heard of there's some statistic as to how many of them it is, but I know it's a significant portion of those in the entertainment and sports spaces that unfortunately don't learn the financial planning side of things. So that's what I was asking y'all about, y'all's thoughts about that, because I oftentimes am just very saddened when I hear that kind of news.
Yeah, so my story, what took me down this pathway to do this business coaching work is my father passed away and inherited enough to feel rich for at least a hot minute. And I thought I could afford to be a starving artist and do all these gigs that didn't pay well and take on students that didn't really want to pay for lessons and do other things and just kind of, that also learned about other, investment things the hard way, let's just say. And, when you're not emotionally ready for it, it's very easy for it to go away. That's why so many lottery winners and other people do end up going broke and losing it, because, there's an emotional intelligence that you need to build up for it.
Yeah. What were your thoughts, Patricia? Like I said, my computer, we had a storm, so it probably knocked me out.
Yeah, I agree with Brian. That you see that happening all the time. Lottery winners that, they win millions and then they're broke, and that they're not ready. I think when you're given something like that and you're not prepared, then you tend to lose it.
No,
So there's a certain amount of wisdom that goes into it all.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. You gotta have that wisdom, and that's even what I was concerned about, because I know here in North Carolina, and I know there are other states that are doing it as well. Part of the way that they were trying to push people to get vaccinated was to have these vaccination lotteries, and I'm going like, well, that's good that we're going to use that as a tool of incentive, but at the same time, are we going to train them as to how to use the money when they get it? Because if you give a person $1 million because they decided to get vaccinated and get the needle in their arm and everything, if you don't teach them how to use the money, then they're going to wind up doing the same thing. It's going to be burned, and we'll wind up some 2 or 3 years later learning that whatever the gentleman, I think we've had 2 winners that wanted that their broker back at their 9 to 5 working at wherever they were working at and everything, because it's just too often what happens.
Yeah. So I hate to cut short, but I have to get going now. So
no, and I'm going to wrap up. One of the things I'm going to tell you is I'm going to do that for both of you and everything, and then I'll probably just run a couple of ads because the show can go anywhere from 2.5 to 3, as I told both of y'all on Pilot. So I'm perfectly fine with us winding down. But I'm gonna have to tell my friend Zach, because he does a show. Used to be on our network, but now he's got his own network and his own platform and everything. 9 on the Grind TV, but he does a show about funk music. He used to do 2. But his primary show is one that he does called Funk from the Front Seat. So it's all about funk music and music life, but it's all kind of like what you're doing, Brian. He literally does it from the front seat of his car. So I'm gonna have to tell him that we had Brian from the front seat as well. So definitely that he literally goes to a secret hiding spot that I'm one of his past producers, and he'll probably bring me in to do some more production and everything. But he'll go to this secret location that actually I'm one of the only ones that knows it other than him. But he'll go to that secret location and do this show from his front seat, cranking up the music and all of that.
It's just too hot out to be outside in the park, unfortunately. So
understood. So I definitely understand. But the thing that I asked Sam, which I'll ask both of y'all to wrap it up, is social media. So since you got to go first, I'll start with you, Brian. So social media, and since we are an international platform, any words of encouragement and words of positivity that you would like to share with our international audience? And then, like I said, I will definitely, of course, be re-airing it, and of course it's been going out to the different other platforms and all of that, so definitely folks will be checking it and all of that. But any words of wisdom and encouragement that you would like to share?
Yeah, one thing about money, just in general, after air and water, that's the 3rd most important resource we need in the developed world. So it has to be the 3rd easiest thing we can get in some way or another. So you have to just realize that money, it's an effect that comes through people. So we have to think about how we can be of service to people, and the more people we can serve, the more money we can bring into our lives.
Agree, definitely agree with you on that. And social media places where folks can find you if they're interested in the business coaching, the money mindset, and the different other things that you're a part of.
Yeah, my website is thelucrativeartist.com, all one word, as opposed to the starving artist. So the lucrative artist, help people get that mindset where it's okay to earn money from their artistry and what they're passionate about doing. But and also have a Facebook page, facebook.com/thelucrativeartist. I'm on Instagram, The Lucrative Artist, and Twitter, Lucrative Art, because somebody took The Lucrative Artist already, and it's a defunct account. But I'm active on all those platforms, so feel free to connect. I'm also on Clubhouse too.
Cool. Well, I'm definitely on Clubhouse, and I'll definitely reach out for you on there. And I know my dad, who, like I said, is a visual artist, is all about making money with his art and things of that nature. So that's actually, I will share a story with you that you'll enjoy. But I remember that one of the places that I work at, they wanted artists to donate and things of that nature. So I reached out to some of my artist friends and everybody, including my dad. And my dad was like, "Are they paying?" And I was like, "No, they just want you to show their art and everything." And Dad was like, "Well, then I'm not interested. I know you're my son, but I'm not interested because I need to get paid for this art, and I do this artwork to get paid." And I mean, he does it because he also enjoys the creativity of it. But at the same time, he wasn't just trying to have it displayed for us to look at. Because I wanted to say that even though it was in a mall space that had the office that we were in at that particular time, the office was in like a suite. So you know how if you go to a mall, you'll see those little office suites and everything. So it would have been just those of us that were in the office suites that would have seen the art. So he saw no value in that, and most of us are in the struggling education space. So it's not like we were going to be buying his art, because his art isn't like, it's not like overly expensive, but it's not cheap either. So definitely he's in that space where he would agree with you that you need to be lucrative about your art and also be intentional about what you're doing and things of that nature. Because I sometimes think that even our visual artists aren't intentional enough, and that they sometimes get suckered into doing freebies and all of that. So I'm sure that you would agree with that as well, Brian. But you got any parting thoughts about what I just shared with you about my example with Dad and being a lucrative artist?
Just when in doubt, charge your worth. There's always going to be somebody who can't afford what you have to offer, but there's always going to be somebody who can't afford to pay more. So don't be afraid to err on the higher side.
No, I definitely agree with you on that. Go on that higher side and all of that. And like I said, Dad's had the pleasure of doing artwork, not just in North Carolina, but in other states as well. And I think he's been approached. I know the art is in other countries, but I don't think that he's traveled to them for art shows. But if anybody's listening and they want to bring him to an art show in another country, I'm sure he'd be open to it. But he's definitely done art in not just North Carolina, but other parts of the East Coast and things of that nature. So definitely loves his art. And I would urge people, including you, Brian, to check out bambooturtle.com. I'm pretty sure it's .com and not .org, but that is where Jim Lee's artwork is at. But you'll see that it's everything from gourds to photography to some really funky kind of art, including found art. So definitely does some really cool things. So hopefully you'll check that out. And I'll also tell him about you and some of your stuff. So I'll send him to the lucrative artists, but definitely check out Dad's work at Bamboo Turtle.
Definitely. Thank you so much. And pleasure meeting you, Patricia, and pleasure meeting
Nice
you, Mark.
meeting you, Brian.
Cool. So we're going to let you go and everything. And I'll just wind up with a little bit more conversation with Patricia and those same kind of thoughts and everything, but definitely glad to have you. And as I tell all my guests, we'd love to have you come back whenever you're available, because I love having guests make return trips, even to share what new things that they are doing, whether it's a book or whether if you're doing a performance or whatever. And one of the things that we're going to start doing on this show, I usually have my trivia segment, but I didn't do as much of it just because the conversation was becoming engaging and all of that. But I usually have my mystery guest trivia section, and I was also adding a section which will be a showcase. And I didn't say when I would start it, and I still don't know. I was thinking about doing it today, but it'll probably be next Wednesday. But the showcase is anybody wants to do a 3 to 5 minute clip, because that's about what our video clip folder will allow and everything. So it can be anything. You can be singing opera, you can be doing poetry, you can be doing whatever, and I will throw those up on the screen, and then that will give people a chance to expose themselves to our audience and everything of that nature. So if you want to do an opera piece, Brian, I would love to have it happen. So like a 3 to 5 minute, you can be even doing it on your cell phone or whatever.
Okay, sounds great.
Cool.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. Same offer goes to you, Patricia, as well. So like you definitely said that you've done some singing and some singing coaching. So if that's something that you're interested in, if you just know other performers, even among your peer group and everything, I would love to have you do that as well. So I just wanted to throw that out there. And I hope that you'll also check out my dad's website, because I am a big fan of his artwork, just like I'm a fan of all of my family members in the different things that they've done. Mom was actually in the nonprofit world, in addition to the radio station that they founded, meaning both my mom and my dad. She went off to work at a couple of foundations. She worked at Z. Smith Reynolds as an employee, and she was the first president of the Golden Leaf Foundation, which is basically one of the foundations created out of the tobacco settlement. So it's money to get people out of the tobacco industry and things of that nature. So she was their first president. They've had, I think, 2 presidents since, or maybe just one, but definitely she was the first president, and definitely gave a lot of support to people to get out of the tobacco industry and to still make money within rural communities, but also some city communities as well, but definitely doing some positive work in society. So she's still around, because like I said, her and my nephews and my brother and others are up in the mountains, but she is still very much active and still has a lot of energy. So I'm a big fan of folks having energy in their 80s. And mom hasn't quite got there, but she's close to it. And dad's already there. But if you see them, you'd probably be like, those folks got to be in their 50s, if not their 40s, because they still got that. I'm convinced that they found the fountain of youth, and they just haven't told me. So I need them to actually reveal it to me.
So that's the way I feel about Bob Proctor, because I think he's 87. Maybe he just turned 88. And my mom is 89.
What?
But she's she's got dementia and she's, you know, she can't do for herself. And I look at Bob and I look at my mom, I'm like, they're, you know, miles apart.
Right.
And yet they're very close in age, you know. It's just, you know, could it just be the mindset? Could it just be, you know, how active? I don't know. I don't know what the answer is there, but yeah.
I don't know the answer. I think a lot of it is mindset, because I think a lot of it is that kind of like belief in yourself. One of the things that I jokingly tell folks, but I'm only semi-joking, is that I have set a goal for myself that I know is an impossible goal, just because from a standpoint of living and humanity, nobody's done it unless you want to believe the Bible and some of the characters within the Bible. But as far as we know, because, you know, there's some question as to how much of that is fact and how much of that is like symbolism and things of that nature. So that being said, we're not aware of anybody that has lived outside of the biblical people beyond 100. So I have always said, and I've been jokingly saying this for years, that I want to go for 200. I mean, the worst I can do is fail. So like I said, I've set the goal of 200 because the worst I can do is fail. Now, the other part of the joke that I also say is I'm not doing anything to help myself get to 200, because my diet consists of usually going to fast food restaurants and other restaurants that are bad for you, not doing enough exercise and the things that you're supposed to do. But then you also hear about the people that make it to 110 and 120, and when the news reporters ask them what did they do, they're like, well, I smoked a pack of cigarettes and I don't smoke, and I drank like a fifth of liquor. I might have my drink of beer or something here and there, but it's usually things that they're not supposed to be doing.
Right.
Like you hear them talking about, you know, still and don't want to be sexist in this regard, but if they're a guy still out there chasing the young women and everything and all of that. So it's usually things that are not supposed to be keeping you alive, but at the same time, that's what's keeping them alive.
Bob Proctor always says, when he's asked, you know, how does he keep going at his age? He says, because I surround myself with younger people.
Right.
And like everybody in his company is under 60.
Wow.
So he surrounds himself by younger people, and that keeps him, he thinks that keeps him going.
And I would agree with him on that, because I know that I've got a lot of friends that are, I have friends that are in my same age range, but I also have friends, like one of my neighbors is a young lady from Brazil, and she's like, I think she just turned 30 last year, or maybe 31 and something like that. But I mean, she's also a master gardener, because I was over there, me and another gentleman that's even older than I am, because I just turned 59 not that long ago, like about a week ago and everything. And then Andrew is probably in his 60s because he's a former Navy person. But we were sitting there having conversations about everything from politics to her garden, because she's got, even though it's an apartment complex, she's got a garden with her second garden, because I think she's been here now 2 years, with the big sunflower. So, I mean, the sunflower is going up to the next apartment complex because she's on the ground level, and the sunflower is already about halfway up to the next apartment and everything. But we're sitting there admiring the garden and just conversating about life in general, music, and whatever else was crossing our mind. But as I said, the age range is probably 30, because I think she just turned 30. She might be 31 to 59, which is my age, to maybe Andrew is like 65 or 70 or something like that. But we're just in there having a conversation and enjoying each other's company for about 20 or 30 minutes. So I think that is the key, is to having a variety of friends and a variety of styles and all of that. So as I was saying, I definitely don't want to hold you up longer either, but I want to give you the same opportunity that I gave the other two gentlemen and everything, which is our social media, where we can find you, any words of encouragement that you would like to leave the global audience and things of that nature. And then I might play about a 5-minute clip of some poetry or some of our other shows, and then get myself out of here, because I'm about ready to have some food myself.
Okay, so my website is yourdreampower.com, and I have a Facebook page under the same name. I'm on LinkedIn, and sometimes you can find my name under Patricia Stepler, and I think on Facebook I'm under Patty Stepler with a Y. So I have Instagram, but I don't use it much. And I just started Clubhouse, so I have not gotten into Clubhouse. Everybody keeps saying, you need to be on Clubhouse, and so I need to investigate that more.
And Clubhouse is interesting. Like, I was talking to some friends of mine about it. Actually, the young ladies that were there at our kind of, for lack of a better term, semi-staff luncheon meeting and everything that we were having at a hotel connected with Duke University, the Washington Duke Hotel, that Nick was fronting the bill for and everything. But as I was telling one of those young ladies, some of it is petty gripes and things that you find in regular conversations that aren't all that fun to listen to, but then there are more knowledgeable kind of conversations around issues and around networking and things that make it worthwhile. It can become addictive because I know that for a while they were not Android friendly, so I only joined like probably about a month ago. And there are times that you're sitting there. I was even telling Annabella this, and she's got a room called Club Annabella and everything. But I was telling her when I was in the room last night, it's like, let's say 2 o'clock, and I have no idea why I'm still up listening to y'all and everything and throwing my conversation in as well. So it can sometimes become overly addictive. So you do have to realize that and realize your own limitations. So at some point, I do sometimes have to be like, okay, I've got the point and I've made my point. So it's time to go get some sleep. So it's like any other new toy. It can become addictive, but I think that that's just the shiny toy attitude that a lot of platforms get. Is that shiny toy, new feel kind of thing. And after a while, it wears thin. But in terms of a networking tool, I think it's something that will be around for a while. And I think it's something that is worth looking into. And I have no money invested in it. So it's not like I'm saying something that's making me any money, but just based on what I've heard and what I've listened to, it does sound like a worthwhile tool for folks to use and things of that nature. And I've actually been using Instagram as well, almost as a tool for this, because what I found out is that Instagram also has Instagram Live, but you can't do a full interview. But like even this particular interview, I might pull out like something that you said about business coaching or something that somebody said and grab like a 2-minute or 3-minute segment and put that in order to draw people to watch what's going on here. So that is what I have found with both Instagram, and people have told me that you can do the same with TikTok. And I have a TikTok account, but I haven't really mastered TikTok yet. But Instagram, I do find to be worthwhile in terms of networking, and the same with Clubhouse. And TikTok, the jury's still out because I'm still trying to learn it.
I haven't even investigated TikTok.
Yeah, I hear you. Like I said, I'm just barely investigating it right now.
There's just too many different social medias and trying to
There's
figure out.
There's so many social medias, and you're sitting there going like, which one am I using this week?
Yeah.
No, I agree with you.
Yeah, I try to stick more with Facebook and LinkedIn are the two.
No, and I think that those are the better ones, and particularly LinkedIn for business and all of that. Do you have any last words before I pull out the commercial? We've had a great conversation. I've thoroughly enjoyed having you. And like I was telling Brian, and like I told Sam, anytime that you want to come back in, whether that's doing that quick singing segment or whether it's just coming in to share whatever you're doing in your life and with your business coaching and different other things, just consider this another home. And anytime that you want to come in, email and let me know. And a lot of times it is conversations like this. Sometimes it's one-on-one. Sometimes it might be 5 or 6. I think the most I've had is 7. Maybe 8 is the max, but definitely it's just an ongoing free flowing conversation. Like I said earlier, just like you would at dinner. And the other show is just the same way.
It was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Enjoyed it.
So, but any parting words that you want to share before I bring up the gamers intro?
I just want to share with people that, if you get an idea and it resonates with you, go after it with all your heart.
So definitely great word, great thoughts, and all of that. So some of these advertisements don't exactly have the right time. So I'm going to give a disclaimer, which is that tomorrow afternoon, the Gamers Den, all the information is correct about what I'm about to bring up, but the Gamers Den is actually at noon. So I think it says 1 o'clock, but it's actually at noon. And we use the gamer industry to talk about issues in general. So it is Jacoby McDuffie's show, but I am one of the 3 co-moderators. So like I said, it's Siren with Cito Gaiman, Kara Oker with Deepened Roots Health Coaching, and myself. So like I said, it's primarily his show, but as I was teasing Jacoby, it's supposed to be your show. How come I wind up doing most of the interviewing? But he was saying that's because I like to run my mouth. So as you've learned, Patricia, he's probably right. So I can't really complain if he lets me do that on his show and everything. So that will be going on tomorrow afternoon at 12, and people will see this particular advertisement. And I'm also going to bring up one about Talking Upstream, which airs on Sundays, even though they're on a temporary hiatus. So the time is correct on this particular advertisement for Talking Upstream. But like any other business, including entertainment businesses, sometimes folks have to take a hiatus. So I think they're on like a few-week hiatus, and hopefully they'll be back at their regular time slot in a little bit. And then Nick, the founder, has a show called The Lawyer's Den. So as Patricia gets out the door, we'll run those ads before bringing up our infamous airplane, which is kind of our thing to get out of here, which is our, they call it an intro. I call it an intro outro because it serves both purposes. But right now, I'm gonna let folks check out the Gamers Den, and I'm gonna drop you off into the back room and everything, backstage and everything. But if you want to sit there and watch the commercials, that's perfectly fine and everything. But if you want to bounce off, that's cool too. Because as soon as the commercials are done, I'm out of here as well. My stomach is telling me, Mark, there's food in the microwave. You need to heat me up.
All right. Thank you, Mark.
No problem. Glad to have you. Well, folks, we're going to give you an extra week to actually find out the clues from last week's mystery guest. That's right. I said I was going to reveal those today. But like I said earlier, we had that luncheon meeting. And then, of course, I had some other things that were going on in my life as well. So we didn't quite get to the revealing of last week's mystery guest. So go back, study those clues, and I will give you a little bit longer to figure out the winners. And by the way, for those of you that are going on to Brian's show, hoping that you're going to see the Battle Royale rematch take place, Tim was not feeling that well. So that will actually take place on hopefully this coming Wednesday. So we're going to give it a week break and everything. I got to get with Brian and find out if that is the case. But I know originally we were saying it's going to be this week that we were going to flip songs and we were going to sing the Rihanna song and they were going to sing B-52's Love Shack, which is the song that me and Tim did last week. But we're going to pull that off and do it next week since Tim was not feeling all that well. But you've also heard me talk about this other new segment that I have put together entitled the Showcase. That's all it's called right now. I'm going to give it some other kind of fancy title later, but right now it's just called the Showcase. And I want people to call in and send me MP3 clips of them doing everything from poetry. And as a matter of fact, I've got the Poetry Slam going on this Friday at Haytime. So I'll try to recruit some of those people to give me some of their clips and everything. But it'll be a segment that'll go on where they will reveal a lot of talent. So it might be anything from poetry to it could even be a cooking demonstration as far as I'm concerned to definitely opera singing to a number of other things. And I've got some people that have said that they're going to do it, including a gentleman that is a haiku champion. And he's told me that he is open to having that conversation as well. So I'm hoping that he's going to do something for us as well. But just to get an idea of what I'm looking for, my friend Calvin Anderson has this wonderful poem, and he had one of his friends recite it. So it doesn't even have to be your work. You can be reciting somebody else's work. I don't even care if you're reciting somebody famous like Robert Frost. or something like that. But we just want folks to have fun showcasing what they are able to do. So whether that's a soliloquy, whether that's a acting soliloquy, like I just said, or whether that's a poetry thing, or whether that's a song, whether that's you even practicing your golf swing. Like I said, it can be any talent that's out there that you are willing to show for about 3 minutes and all of that. But right now, I'm gonna give you a clip of what folks did with Calvin's. I believe Calvin wrote this poem, but I think it was Guy that was performing it. But definitely, this gives you an idea of kind of the things that we're looking for. But this is something that is going to be going on a regular basis. So it's my new segment, and right now it's just called the Showcase, even though I may give it some other funky title and everything. But it's definitely just the Showcase, and it is part of the online dinner party. So I'm gonna give you a sample of what I'm looking for based on Guy Fort's portrayal of this particular point. And then we'll probably get on out of here with that airplane and everything along that line. But right now, let's check out this particular rendition so that y'all get an idea of what I'm looking for.
The difference between thinking and doing and living in the 21st century. They teach us about being a real quarterback-oriented games. We don't have to just use video games and live in the shadows of good things because of them. We grow up with agility far larger and bigger than we are tall. Parents are the champions and have to be our first life coaches and know-it-alls. Who knows how this came to be? Coaches will ask you if you know your right foot from your left, if you know yourself, if you act knowingly good or bad, if you can move and negotiate a field with style and form, if you can tackle or throw a pass, or if your last name is that of a clown, if you can let someone know on the team that you are in trouble before you cause yourself or someone else trouble. If you are ready to learn teamwork or aware that you started out today with your pants down or your sportsmanship was left on the kitchen table, if you know the social studies, the alphabets, science, music, characters, and the stats and the numbers of a great student player eligible to stay on the team, and if you know the poise of great athletic champions and their scientific attitudes that are historical or music to us now, if you have the swag of the game, the discipline, the performance, and artistic form down pat, and if you have the style of gymnastics that the sport has with life, if you have the work ethic and determination to make it all seem easy and not a game at all, if you have the knowledge of all the above, or you don't know things like this even make the difference. I think that when it comes to the importance of parents and their field and self-knowledge, wisdom, virtues, and courage, their teachings, love, respect, care that they illustrate on the field and in the grind of life with their actions and their ideas, experiences, muscle, and strategic magic and skills wrapped around us with their priceless love. For their verbs to be that make us winners in this hard and fast third century that without them, kids and adults, athletes could hardly see or do anything at all. Parents teach us the difference between playing video games and playing on the field. Parents teach us how to be champions. A huge hug should go to parents, coaches, and parent-like community people who have love on the field for you and who are champions for your life, both in and out the games.
Yes, that was kind of what I have in mind and everything. So definitely, if that's something that you're interested in, definitely send us an example. And of course, the showcase. And like I said, it'll have a much better title later on. Definitely, that is something that we're looking for on a regular basis. Don't forget, there's all kinds of great programming that you can catch on tomorrow. I just mentioned the Gamers Den, but also at 4:30, LA Bachelor will be doing his conversation around politics and around possibly sports and other things. And I help him with that show. So the LA Bachelor Hour will be at 4:30. And of course, we've got Coco McMillan at 6 on Thursday. And then, of course, we've got Stephen Walker at 8. So definitely some great folks that you want to check out. And by the way, don't forget that we have started a fantasy sports program as well. And that's actually at Tuesday at 4:30 as well. So that's with Terry, my good friend Terry. And of course, he's got some thoughts about different football teams and players that you ought to pick up and all of that. And I'm hoping that Randy and some of the Tougher gang will join the conversation as well, because I am part of the Tougher Fantasy Football League. And I'm hoping that some of them will join in, as well as others from other fantasy leagues. So definitely keep that in mind as well. So that's Tuesday and at 4:30. And like I said, tomorrow I will be on at noon with Jacoby. So I did see Jacoby and his daughter. This time he came with his daughter hanging out with us and everything. So we had a good old time and definitely enjoyed ourselves, and definitely met two new young ladies, Jackie, and I forgot the other young lady's name, but Jackie was from Syria and the other young lady was from Nigeria. And apparently they're going to be helping us doing some stuff as well. So we're looking forward to having them join the team also. But right now, I'm going to bring up another spot of a friend of mine's business kind of thing that they do, and then get this airplane on out of here. But I hope y'all enjoyed the show, and we'll catch you on the next time.
Are you looking for money-saving strategies for your business and personal finances? Are you tired of working hard every day with little or nothing to show for it? Contact Prosperity Financial Services, LLC right now for your free financial consultation. Call now to reserve yours today, 804-349-8600, 804-349-8600.